A very warm welcome and good afternoon. Welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting, the first of two today on Monday the 20th of July at 2 p.m. at Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council. My name is Councillor Broadhead. I'm the Chairman of the Board. Welcome to all of those who are joining us either on the call, watching us via YouTube or other means, and also members of the press and public that are joining us as well. We are still working under the virtual regulations, so this is a virtual meeting. All of the participants in the meeting are joining us from the comfort of their own homes via the functionality of Skype. Therefore, I will read out the following notice as to how this meeting will be managed from a housekeeping point of view, as we do at the beginning of all of these meetings using the virtual regulations. Please note that this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Board is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure that the meeting is managed effectively, please could everybody present follow the ground rules for speaking. Firstly, only speak when invited to by myself as chairman. Secondly, if you could state your name before you speak if you have not been introduced by name. This is because some people do not have the benefit of visual, and therefore it lets them know who is talking. If you could mute your microphone when you are not speaking. If you would like to speak, please type the letters RTS to request to speak in the instant message conversation panel on the left-hand side of your screen and click the arrow button to send. Please note that this panel is visible to all parties on the call. If you are able, it may also be helpful to indicate the particular issue you wish to speak on in order to try and maintain the flow of the meeting. If there are any recommendations moved that require a formal vote, these will be carried out by myself as chairman, asking for a response for, against or abstain from each councillor of the board. The regulations governing virtual meetings require all participants to hear and be heard throughout. Therefore, when voting, I will ask participants to do so in the knowledge that they have heard the debate and been engaged in the meeting throughout in accordance with the regulations. If you do not feel that this has been the case throughout the meeting, please alert me through the chat window and therefore abstain from voting. And finally, should the connection of myself as chairman be lost throughout the meeting, the vice chairman, Councillor Haynes, will take over. A short adjournment will be agreed until the connection is resumed. Viewers of the live feed at that point may see a holding screen throughout an adjournment. That holding screen will also count for any other times that we have to, for various reasons, stop the live recording. Finally, if I could ask that all background noise is kept to a minimum as far as possible, and that mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to the silent setting for the duration of the meeting. So we'll get started straight into the meeting. If I could ask Claire, do we do apologies first, Claire? I don't have that as the, or do we go straight into item 1?
I'll give the apologies first, Chairman, just for clarity, that we've received apologies for this meeting from Councillor Pete Miles, and we have no substitute members.
Thank you very much. In which case, the first item on our agenda is the election of chairman. This is due to go to a secret ballot if it is contested. Therefore, could I ask for any nominations for the position of chairman? I have a request to speak from Councillor Drew Mellor. Councillor Mellor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd be very pleased to propose you to continue your position as chair of this board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mellor. And I have a request to speak from Councillor Haynes. Councillor Haynes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm very happy to second the proposal to put yourself, Councillor Philip Broadhead, forward as chair of this ONS board.
Thank you very much. Are there any further nominations? I'll just wait to see if anybody else is indicating. If not, I believe that because that is uncontested, we don't need to go to a roll call for that one. I'm just looking for confirmation on that. Yes, I think so. In which case, thank you very much. I've thoroughly enjoyed being chairman for this past year and look forward to doing so into the future. Thank you very much for your support. I'll then move to item 2, which is the election of vice chairman. Once again, seek any proposals for a chairman. From the chair, I'd like to make a proposal that the existing vice chair, Councillor Haynes, continue. So I'm quite happy to propose Councillor Haynes. Whether anybody would like to second? Councillor Mellor?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a second. Second Councillor May Haynes in a position as Vice Chair of this board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mellor. Do I have any further requests for nominations? I'm not seeing any at this time. Thank you very much. In which case we have a proposer and a seconder, no alternate nominations, so that confirms Councillor Mayhanes as Vice Chairman of the Board for the coming year. And can I say from the Chair, it's been a pleasure working with you, Councillor Haynes, and I look forward to working with you for another year. So thank you very much for putting up with me as much as anything else, and all the assistance that you give, obviously. I will now move to item number 5, which is declarations of interest. Do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interests or any local interests on any items on the agenda? Councillor Anderson, Mark Anderson.
Actually, sorry, Chairman, it's not for this meeting, it's for the next meeting. I was getting ahead of myself.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mike Brooke.
Sorry, Chair, the video is playing up as usual. Thank you, Chair. I don't know whether I need to declare the interest in BDC when we come to the next item on the minutes and the potential alteration which relates to that. Could I have clarification?
Yes, as it is, I believe it's a non-pecuniary interest anyway. So
it would be a local interest.
But good to declare up front. So happy to take that. Thank you very much, Councillor.
So that's as a council representative on the board of BDC.
The Bournemouth Development Company. Yeah, no problem at all. Actually, I have also been appointed as one of the council's representative on the BDC board as from, I think now, so I will make a similar declaration at this point in preparation for what you're going to say next, I assume, so yes. For the purposes of clarity. Thank you very much, Councillor Brooke. Do I have any further declarations that any members wish to declare? Nope, I'm not seeing any. Okay, thank you very much. In which case, I'll move to item 6, which is the minutes and action sheet. The board are asked to approve the minutes of the meetings which were held on the 18th of May and the 15th of June. Do I have any comments on those minutes? First, I'll take Councillor Brooke first. Councillor Brooke.
Yeah, it's on the not so much the minutes as the action sheet. So can we
come to the action sheet in a moment? I think I have Councillor Trent that wishes to raise a comment on the minutes. Councillor Trent.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It would appear that I was not minuted as attending the meeting. I had replaced Councillor Rachel Maidment, but Councillor Rachel Maidment appeared as attending the meeting and not myself. Hopefully that will get corrected. The other point I was going to raise, I have found the missing minute, so that's fine. Yeah, but it's the attendance at the meeting is not recorded.
Thank you very much, Councillor Trent, and thank you for raising that with me before the meeting. I had a quick look, and you're entirely correct. You were not minuted as attending that meeting, nor actually noted as the replacement member of the board. So I will get those minutes duly amended. Are there any further comments on the minutes for the last 2 or 4 meetings before we move on to the action sheet? I'm not seeing any, in which case I'll go back to Councillor Brooke. You had a point that you wished to raise on the action sheet, Councillor Brooke.
Yes, fine, thank you, Chair. The very last item on that action sheet relates to the Durley development. It says in the outcomes that effectively the Cabinet accepted the recommendations from the board. If you read the minutes of Cabinet, it's very, very clear that the Cabinet did not accept the recommendation, and therefore the item needs amending.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brooke, and again, thank you for notifying me of that before the meeting. Again, it's a correct observation. Obviously, we've got ahead of ourselves and live in hope, but I will get that amended as well. Are there any further comments on either the minutes or the action sheet before we move on to the next item on the agenda? Nope, in which case I'll move straight on to item 7, which is public issues, and could I ask if we have any public issues?
Sorry, Chairman. Just to confirm that I have not received any public questions, statements or petitions for this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. In which case we'll move on to item 8, which is the chairman's update, which we've used as a bit of an introduction, and also any items that are not on the agenda. We are, as colleagues will know, since we've started undertaking these virtual meetings, we have done a lot of work on the council's response to the COVID-19 crisis. Obviously, we're not out of the woods yet. We are now entering the new world of the initial post-pandemic or emerging from the post-pandemic period. However, there is still an awful lot going on dealing directly both with the council's response directly to COVID-19 and also the wider issues that are happening because of it, and how we emerge from the crisis. So we do have 2 meetings as normal today. The first meeting, this 2 p.m. meeting, again following the format that we've been following previously, is predominantly focused on those immediate and slightly longer term COVID-19 issues. So we'll be splitting the meeting up today into 2 parts. The first part will be about the council's response and how we continue to react to the crisis. The second part of the meeting, I'm very pleased to have a number of external representatives from the business improvement districts, the destination tourism management board, and also the hospitality sector, so that we can hear how they're reacting to the crisis, how they're finding it as we find our new way, but also very importantly what the council can do for them and how we can assist in that process and what they are looking for as well. So again, this first meeting is still very much focused on the response to the COVID-19 crisis. The second meeting, our 6 p.m. meeting, will then revert to norm, and we'll be looking at a number of the cabinet related items. So without delaying any further, I will move on to item 9, which is the BCP Council's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We do have a cabinet paper on this issue which we are considering as well, and I know that all board members will have already read that. So therefore I will pass on to Councillor Slade, the leader of the council, along with the chief executive, to draw out any pertinent points of that that they wish to bring to our attention, as well as any other additional items regarding the COVID-19 pandemic response from the council. So I'm not sure who'd like to go first. Councillor Slade?
Yes, so I've asked the Chief Executive if he can give us an overview of the paper, and I've got some key pertinent points from the various sections, which I'll come on to if he doesn't. So I have a list, and Graham's going to start, because I'm assuming most of the questions will probably come back towards me, so I can do my talking later.
Thank you very much, Councillor Slade. In which case I'll pass to Graham Farrant. Thank you very much for joining us, Chief Executive. As I mentioned in the preamble, we've got the report in front of us, so any specific points that you wish to bring out would be very welcome. Thank you, Chief Executive.
Okay, thanks, Chairman. Thanks very much. It is probably worth saying that this is a rapidly changing situation, as it has been since March, or indeed in February. I did note. I looked at some notes that I had of a Southwest Chief Executives meeting on, I think it was the 13th of February, when I came back and said, we need to start preparing for a major global pandemic, which is going to affect economies, and it's going to be of potentially very serious nature, and that's what we've played out. It is difficult trying to keep up with the ever-changing advice and expectations on councils, both from government and from our local communities. And it is worth saying it is a very complex environment. The communication is not particularly clear and is changing rapidly. So we are looking at a change in circumstances. So, for example, government's stepping down its support for shielded individuals from the end of the month. So that will stop the delivery of basic food packages and the supply lines there. So we need to make sure that everybody has some alternative provision and goes back to life as it was before lockdown. Within the corporate incident management team today, we agreed to step down the Together We Can helpline and to more formally integrate those services back into the normal customer contact centre. So we're seeing quite a few changes now where we're beginning to get back to business as usual. We also have the local outbreak management plan that is now in place, ready to be tested, ready to be pushed hard, but that has now been set up. And you will have heard government announcements over the weekend, or just at the end of last week, about the Contain strategy, which does put some quite draconian powers in the hands of local authorities, and clearly those need to be used very carefully. We're now working out exactly what those mean. Of course, you won't find those in the Cabinet report because that was written a week and a half ago. In fact, you wouldn't have even found them on our desks on Friday because we're only now getting the advice on what that government announcement actually means. but it is the power to step in and effectively initiate a local lockdown in an individual premise or in an industry or in a geographical area. So we do need to ensure that we've got good processes for that. So there's still a lot to do in terms of the preparation for business as close as we can get to business as usual, the new normal, I think we've been calling it, but also trying to take account of some of these new changes and make sure we've got good systems in place for that. There is, for me, an issue which I've been pushing national government to get, which is more information to come out of Public Health England. So my example is in the middle of May, we had very crowded beaches. We had no noticeable increase in cases. In the middle of June, we had very crowded beaches. We have no evidence of any increase in cases locally of COVID-19. Public Health England has been monitoring that. We ought to be getting some messages out now from Public Health England about whether or not they could see that maybe crowded beaches do not lead to COVID-19, whatever other unpleasant side effects there might be in antisocial behaviour, etc., but whether or not that leads to a spike in COVID-19 cases. And our local evidence is that it doesn't. So we're trying to pull those messages out because that would allow us to be more clear about what was, what we don't need to prepare for as much as what we do need to prepare for. It's worth saying as well as this is a council that's still trying to settle into its own skin, if you like, of being a council. We still have lots to do following the merger, but actually our reputation, I think, has been enhanced over the last few months. We're doing a lot of work regionally and nationally, either through MHCLG or direct into other government departments. We're well represented on the Tourism Good Practice Network, links to MHCLG about volunteering, about economic recovery, local government finance, both via SIPFA and via the Chartered Institute of Public Finance Accountants, and also via MHCLG, the ministry in which to report, and the Treasury. So I think actually as a council we've come through this in a strong position. I was looking back at some of our responses and thinking about the pace of our response. So getting the Creekmore testing site up and running within 48 hours, we've forgotten about. That was only about 8 weeks or so ago, but we got that set up, that's up and running. We reviewed the options for a potential Nightingale Hospital at the BIC, the Bournemouth International Centre, and put that in place and ready. And we've responded with potentially for the need for up to 1,000 mortuary spaces, put all that in place. That's all been well dealt with. I think our R-cubed task force, looking at how we respond to the needs of businesses and get the towns back up and running, has actually been very successful, and it's had some really good comparison with other towns across the South Coast, for example. And the payment of our grants has not only been prompt and efficient, but actually we've had really good anti-fraud mechanisms in place. So we had some fraud controls in place and detected some potentially fraudulent applications quite early on in the process. And I think that was one where we have worked well. Situation on things like personal protective equipment, PPE, is much calmer now. Still need to keep an eye on it, but actually there seems to be sufficient supplies coming through, and our community resilience is strong. Tremendous response from volunteers, with over 2,500 volunteers coming forward, not all of whom have been used simply because of the volume that we had. So now we're focusing on the local outbreak plan and the contained strategy, and then the R-cubed sort of recovery plan. The only other thing to mention, I guess, is right at the head of the report, which was the major incident about 3 weeks ago. It has seemed to me this was effectively a perfect storm of 8.9 million people being furloughed, the sun being out, the beaches being the only place that you could go, the only destinations that were available, and that cross-agency group that met, that decided to call the major incident and to hold it in standby form. Actually, that gave a very good response. It worked well. It allowed us to maximise cross-agency working, and that got everybody lined up and ready to operate at scale and at pace. We have taken up some issues that came up from that, either with Network Rail or with other agencies. And I'm pleased to say the last couple of weekends have been much calmer. We still have that major incident in standby mode, and it's allowing us to respond and to monitor the situation at the weekends as well. So all in all, some positive responses. One thing we have now launched, again, not in the report, but we weren't aware of it until the end of last week in terms of finalising it, is a Crowded Places app, which is available on the App Store for both iPhone and Android, which will split the beach into 26 different segments and identifies which of those are crowded which ones are uncrowded, and therefore we'll be publicising that over the next few weeks to get that message out. So that's my update, really, Chairman. It is rapidly moving. Unfortunately, every time we draft the report, within a couple of days, something else significant has changed. There's details in there about our social care response and children's services response in particular. Happy to take any questions once the leader's done her introduction.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive. Councillor Slade, I'll pass over to you now. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. So Graham's reference to the app literally is live. We got a message on Saturday morning to say that could we test it. There's about 4 or 5 of us who were using it over the weekend just to make sure it worked, and I think it demonstrates one of the fantastic responses that the team have had in saying, look, we've got a problem here. We're an incredibly busy resort. We want to be busy, but actually we need to learn better on how to manage it. So I'm hoping it will be available much more quickly than Graham suggests. But one of the great things it will do is tell you where the toilets are, where the lifeguards are, whether it's a dog beach and things. So yep. I hope that some of the issues we've seen over the last few weeks in lack of information available for people will be eased by that new app, and that app has got some national interest in it, because I think it's one of the earliest ones to do that. One of the other things I just want to cover, Graham's very well covered some of the things that we've been sort of held up as doing much more quickly. I think one of the things I would reflect on in the paper and sort of coming potentially towards the end of this 6 months of response is where things have needed to be done. We do seem to have been able to respond pretty quickly in comparison to a lot of our peers. So if you take, for example, the issues of playgrounds, the announcement came that the playgrounds could open from the Saturday. We had about 75% of our playgrounds open on that first day, with all bar 2 open by the Monday. Other councils that we were in contact with 2 weeks later were just starting to open their playgrounds. The same is true of toilets, where we worked really hard to get them all open as quickly as we could. Some areas are only now sort of finalising their toilet programmes. So one of the things I will say about the officers' response across all of the departments is that they have been working at an absolutely incredible pace to try and make sure we're responding as quickly as we can. That does mean occasionally you get it, slightly not as perfect as it might have wanted to be, but we have worked quickly. The volunteering, it turns out that we've had one of the best responses from volunteers of all councils, and again that's been called up by the LGA to look at what we did. The other thing which you may have seen over the weekend and is referred to in the housing element of the paper is the work we've done with our homeless population. Clearly, they are an incredibly complex group of people to work with. The paper refers to 50 individuals moved on. It's actually now 74 of our 250 that we've been able to move into some alternative, more longer term provision. Every one of those individuals have been registered with a GP. They've had health checks. Some of them are now engaged in meaningful work. I think we've got one that's heading towards the military service. Many that are coming off of substances, all of whom's health and well-being is improving. And again, we've been asked to sort of write a paper on actually how you can turn a crisis into something really positive for a group of very, very vulnerable people. Not getting away from the fact, and I'm thinking of some particular individuals on this group who find that you're right, there are areas where we've housed some of these people where it's caused a short-term issue with the impact on the wider community, and we're working really hard with our community safety team to address that as quickly as we can. A couple of other brief things to note about the adult services, a few changes from last month. We have stood up some of our day support that we hadn't got in place before. As this pandemic goes over a longer period, the impact on people who were in day services and have been at home full time has increased. So the need for respite for partners and family members has increased. So we have put back in a limited element of support during the daytime for some of those individuals. That's obviously having a cost implication, but is all able to be back funded to the money coming through from the COVID government funding. The other significant increases around our shared lives, which are the incredible people that take adults into their home, vulnerable adults in, and support them. Again, those individuals would normally be out by day. These families are having to provide 24/7 care, so we've uplifted what we give to them. And we are still working on a rapid discharge from hospital. So our teams in adult social care are having to work in very unusual circumstances in moving people out of hospital in a different way than we did pre-COVID. That will probably lead to a permanent change of the way of working, but it's still very much in the sort of testing stage. The big issue around children's, which I think we've all noticed an impact from, school appeals has been the biggest story within children's. We had over 150 appeals on schools, and those would normally be held sort of face to face and can be moved through relatively quickly. Because of the need to do virtual meetings, a significant proportion of our democratic services staff have been taken up with doing school appeals, which have now, I believe, come to an end or just about to come to an end. That has had a knock-on effect to the ability to run some of our other member groups and some of our other committees. And also, it's been a very difficult thing for families to have to deal with. How do you cope with an appeal when there's no one you can physically chat to? So that has been a really tough thing for families, schools and staff to deal with. The two growing issues in children's that I think are concerning at the moment is an increasing risk of safeguarding, as we've not had the same contact with vulnerable children than we would normally have had. And now, of course, the summer issues around the lack of childcare available. So at exactly the same time as people are being told by government to go back to work. Internally, that's not a problem for us because the council staff team have done an incredible job in adjusting to remote and flexible working, which obviously will continue over the summer. But in the wider community, there are rumblings of parents who are really concerned about coming off of furlough at exactly the same time as they have no childcare. So we're working hard to try and do what we can to support that. And the other area that I just want to flag, which again people might not be aware of, is the work in our communities team, the environmental health officers and the trading standards officers, the call on their time in having to attend businesses who are breaching COVID secure regulations, whether it be checking businesses and whether they have off sales licenses to trade. Oh, sorry, Chris, I'm being told it's been 400 appeals on schools. I apologise. That was a massive job. Done an incredibly good job. The EHOs are having to attend businesses where they're potentially breaching COVID regulations on perhaps things like beauticians, tanning places, places that shouldn't be opening. And the trading standards have been dealing with licence allegations of breaches, which has obviously put them under enormous amounts of pressure. Because as businesses reopen for food, there's already issues there they have to deal with. So just recognising that issue. On transport, we have continued with the free parking for NHS staff, which again I think is something that is really welcome for the team. And we're having to deal with the changed circumstances of buses, whereby people are sort of in one hand being told please don't use the bus, and in the next hand being told please don't use your car. You know, it's an impossible position that people are reporting to the council people not wearing a mask when actually it's not the responsibility of the council. And of course the other issue around the emergency transport measures that the government brought in, a very clear ruling that said there's money for councils to put in temporary measures to improve the numbers of people walking and cycling on the condition that they are in place in 4 weeks and they have very limited pre-action consultation and notification, and that they're actually consulted on throughout the first 6 months of their existence. That's obviously causing some frustration from people who are used to longer term consultations, but they are very much in line with the rules and regulations, and work is going on to try and make sure we can fulfil the obligations. The second tranche of money that the government have given to us, we are hoping will come with a slightly longer inward delay. We haven't yet, we've been told how much we've got, and it's significant, it's about 800,000 in tranche 2, but we haven't yet had all the details around how that will come, how much time we have to spend. So that's pretty much covers most things. Just to briefly touch on the discretionary grant scheme, That went live on Friday with tranche 2. We have got money left. Everybody who was rejected for a previous grant because they didn't meet the criteria are being reassessed against the new criteria, which is great news. Some of them we know will qualify, because in writing the criteria for the second wave, we've deliberately looked at in what way people didn't qualify previously, where they have had genuine need. So we have tried to write it that way round, and that has a window to last to the end of this month. Again, a very short window, but we're doing what we can to get that out to all business organisations so that people can claim. So I'll leave it there, and I'm sure I will have lots of questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Slade, I have indications already. I'll move straight away to Councillor Bartlett, who has a question. Councillor Bartlett.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just one of clarification. Something the leader just mentioned about the environmental enforcement officers checking on COVID, issues with the businesses. Now, when I looked at an issue the other day, I was directed to the Health and Safety Executive, and in fact there was an online form to report those kind of issues. Just for clarity, can you tell me who should I be directing these questions to?
It depends, and I say it depends because I've tried to do the same thing myself. It seems to depend what the issue is, if it's a licensed premises or not. But I've found that both our trading standards team and our environmental health team have been really helpful in clarifying whether they can deal with it or whether it's health and safety executive. So my first port of call would be, if it's not clear from the government form, I would actually ring the trading standards team and ask them, because I have been directed in both places when I've reported some.
It might be worth saying, Chairman, I think there's about 3,000 premises within the BCP area that the Health and Safety Executive enforce health and safety in, and there's about 13,000 premises in the BCP area that the Council enforces health and safety in. So it really depends on the definition. If it's manufacturing, industrial, that's generally the Health and Safety Executive. Construction sites, they do health and safety, but shops, office locations, things like that, then the Council is the enforcing agency.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mike Green. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to drill down a little bit on some of paragraph 3 in the report, which talks about that horrific time we had on the Wednesday and Thursday, the 24th and 25th of June, when everyone decided to descend on Bournemouth. This was obviously the second time this had happened within a few weeks, as we had it in the May bank holiday, which was absolute chaos. We did hear from the leader, I think it was in writing actually, that at that stage we only had 25% of our normal seafront staff on duty. And I'd like to look at a couple of things, if you don't mind, Chairman, on the enforcement side, and maybe if I can start with seafront, that would be great. So obviously we only had that 25% on in the May bank holiday. What numbers did we have on for this 24th and 25th of June, when everyone knew what was likely to happen? And do we think they're sufficient? I don't know, is Councillor Allison around? Because it may be better for him to...
I am representing Councillor Allison at the moment because he's actually unwell, so I'm responding on behalf of tourism for the next few weeks. So in terms of the actual numbers of staff, I can't give you the numbers of staff. What I can tell you is that by the time we got to late June, as a result of what happened in May, there was a recruitment drive and a significant number of people were in place. We weren't up to 100% of our summer staffing. That would not have been in place by the end of June under any sort of terms. However, everybody who was working was working. We unfortunately had a number of senior staff within the seafront services who, until recently, have been shielded, and so in May they were still unavailable for work for their own reasons that we can't control. But outside of those who were shielded, everyone was in work, and the summer staff had been recruited. So we were up to a good complement of staff. all of the toilets were open and all of our parking enforcement officers were available, although there were still a significant number of parking enforcement staff who were still shielded at that point, and it's not a role that you can simply move people across in. In terms of comparisons on beach numbers, I'm not sure what you're referring to on that. Is it to do with numbers of visitors? Yes, we knew we were going to have a lot of visitors at that point, and we have no issue with the number of staff. So the staff was appropriate for the number of visitors that we expected and the number of visitors that we received. A lot of the issues that we had were around the profile of visitor and also the very unusual nature of visitors continuing to arrive throughout the day and into the evening, whereas the normal profile of our beach arrivals is that they go up and up and up and up. They peak at early afternoon and then they begin to tail off. What actually happened at that time was a continuation throughout the afternoon and through to the evening. We had some people arrived at midnight on the Wednesday because they thought they'd heard the stuff was going down and they wanted to make sure they were there to experience it. So it was a very unusual in that terms.
Chairman, can I just add, in terms of national comparators, it is worth saying, isn't it, that the feedback we had on the regional calls was that on Exmouth Beach, police drew batons. That's not normal expected behaviour. In Devon, the police served their first Section 35 dispersal order under antisocial behaviour ever. In Sefton, north of Liverpool, very similar issues, and there were similar issues reported in Southend. So when I've talked to colleagues across the country, those behaviours were extraordinary and were described as such across much of the country.
Okay, I think Councillor Green, did you have you want to come back on that?
I would please on seafront, and then to go on to the parking enforcement that Councillor Slade mentioned, please. So on the seafront, the thing I'm particularly concerned me was the number of unauthorised encampment tents. On the Thursday morning, I walked from just before Bournemouth, well, basically west of Bournemouth Pier. I counted 60 tents that were there. And we should have been enforcing against those. Now, I have an indication as to why that would happen, but maybe Councillor Slade would like to give her interpretation, and then I can come back on that and then move on to car parking, please, Chairman.
Yeah, of course. In terms of the enforcement around camping on the beach, we did have staff brought in on Thursday morning to actually deal with the moving on of campers. We have staff on till 10 o'clock at night on the beachfront. As I've indicated, we had people arriving at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning to make sure that they were ready for the next morning. Our beachfront staff don't work at midnight. I don't think that's something that we would expect them to do. When the staff started arriving in the morning, the state of the beaches was so terrible that a lot of them were called to deal with that. I was there very early on Friday morning, and there were quite a large number of tents there on Friday morning. And the issue that I became aware of was the fact that whilst we can move people on, if they don't move on, we then have to work with the police to actually take further action. And there is quite a time lag. You'll also be aware there were considerable police resource issues over those couple of days. They were fantastic in attending a huge number of incidents across our area. And the ability for them to move tents on was not something that they were able to give as much support to as we would like. The police also, there are restrictions around how quickly you can move people on. I think the ban on sleeping on the beach is not written in the way that most people realise. And that's something that I've asked the team to look at in terms of the wording of the bylaws.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. Councillor Green, we've got a number of other people wanting to come in, so if we can keep questions and answers pretty short, that would be very helpful. Councillor Green.
Thank you. That is actually quite a different answer from the one that the Cabinet Member for Tourism gave me by email, which is that there were insufficient staff and they had to move. So not one was used on the Thursday morning to evict the illegal campers, and rather that all of them were diverted onto litter picking because we didn't have enough to be able to do that without them. So
I did. So just to clarify, I did actually say just then that we brought staff came in and that many of them were diverted. So they're still speaking to people and saying you need to move on from this, because I actually witnessed the tractors having to go round people early in the morning. So it's not a conflict at all, but it is saying that there was a diversion need to actually make sure we could get the beach safe to be able to be used, because there are actually incredibly it's not, I repeat, it's not as easy as you think to move people on from the beach, because there is a process that has to be followed, and that process is not an instant process.
And in this case, Chairman, there were no evictions at all. But just moving on to parking enforcement. Again, we've had this problem on Maybank holiday that we realised. Now, Councillor Slade has talked about the large numbers who were shielding, etc. Councillor Slade, do you know what the budgeted number of council officers are and what number were out?
Yes.
Okay.
So I know that there are 44 parking enforcement officers, and there were only 32, I believe, who were, or around between 30 and 34, who were actually operational at all. And obviously they work from 7 in the morning till 10 at night on a 7-day rota. So you are not going to have 32 people able to work. I believe there are about half of that working at any one time because of a 7-day rota system. So nobody was on leave, but there are a significant number that weren't able to work due to shielding.
Thank you. Chairman, if I may then, the total number of budgeted civil enforcement officers, or traffic wardens as they used to be known, is 50. We do have some vacancies.
We have some vacancies.
We had 2 who were shielding, and in total, according to Councillor Hadley, a total of 18. A third of the officers who are on the budget were actually out on the streets over the course of the day. Some of them tried to make up for it by doing some overtime as well, but we had only 18 out of 50 budgeted staff doing that. The result, and we can see the number of tickets that were issued, there were still vast swathes of illegally parked vehicles that were not ticketed. In fact, my colleague in Westcliff walked for about 400 yards on one particular road, and in that little walk counted 89 unticketed vehicles before coming across one that had a ticket. And this was in an area where the request had gone out on those 2 days in May, on the Wednesday of this further chaos, and on the Thursday, and yet there were insufficient numbers. That is, apart from anything else, more than £4,000 in revenue that's been lost by the council taxpayer. It's 89 people who believe that they can park there again whenever they want without a problem, and there's hundreds more who will have seen that happening. I think it really is time to accept that this just wasn't good enough.
Well, I'm not going to accept the numbers that you give, because they're not the numbers I've been given. So somebody's been given the incorrect information. I know that there's a lot more than 2 people who were shielded. That may be currently we have 2 shielded. I would be very surprised if it's only 2, knowing the cohort of people. I think the suggestion that there are 89 vehicles in one road, I hope you phoned that in when you saw it, or your colleague did. Because it may well be that actually that road had already been ticketed, and those vehicles had arrived afterwards. But I think you have to accept that with thousands of roads, even if there had been, let's say, half of the people working, because under any circumstances you are never going to have more than that working, because they work over 15 hours a day, 7 days a week, you're going to have people on shifts. So you would expect the most that you are likely to have is 25 if 100% of the people were well. I think there are actually a number more vacancies that are unfilled than you suggest, so I think my figures are closer to being correct. So even with the best will in the world, if you had 24 people 24 people working as opposed to 18, you're still going to have roads that were visited at maybe 11 o'clock in the morning, some tickets given out, and the road fills up at 1 o'clock. So I think that's an unrealistic expectation. The reality is that since May, we have been trying to get in place more stringent measures. The previous council of Bournemouth and the previous council of Poole did not have anything in place around clamping or around towing away of vehicles for illegal parking. We have not cut the budget for traffic wardens, so therefore we're working on the same numbers that we had previously, and we haven't gained any land. So you know, we would be in the same situation in any other circumstance. Just heading back, just to clarify back, sorry, there were 26 eviction notices given on Wednesday, the 24th of June. In terms of tents, so just to clarify that.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. I've got a few other members wishing to speak, so I'll go on to Councillor Trent first. Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to go backwards because I've got about 3 questions, but it's going to be in order that it was mentioned.
Could I ask that you give all 3 questions at once, if that's all right, just to save us some time? It'd be very helpful.
Well, yeah, I'll give them at once, but I'll do them in order, otherwise I shall miss something out. Reference was made very early on about vulnerable shielded people not being serviced in the way that they have been. There is an issue whereby people are going to be going out who, quite frankly, are still in danger because the virus hasn't gone away. It's just not as prevalent as it has been. Do we have the ability to continue to support these people and also to advise them, because there will be a lot of very concerned elderly people and disabled people that have been shielding that you know, might be worried about what's happening. The next point is, in fact, it's more of a point than a question. There was a reference made to the consultation on things like cycleways and a limit of 4 weeks on the consultation.
No, that's not a 4-week limit on consultation. 4 weeks before they had to start to be implemented. 7 days consultation.
Yeah, so basically it was a lightning thing, and it seems to me that some members haven't taken that on board when they've criticised the speed at which certain things have been introduced. And I just really want to make that point because I find it annoying when people are making a lot of capital out of something which you know, the government that they support have introduced. And you know, the other thing is on the beach restrictions, there were some new abilities to restrict access to beaches and public places, but and I noticed today that there were beach car parks full of sandbanks as I came down here to do the Skype thing, because I haven't got room to do it from home. But these restrictions can only be made after evidence of an outbreak or a local spike, and not in a precaution and not precautionary. So is there a way in which we can manage the expectation? Because I kind of have a feeling that people are going to say, oh, you've got to stop people going on the beach, you've got the right to do that. Can that be clarified?
Can I take them in reverse order, please, Chairman? Is that okay?
Please do.
So you're absolutely correct. I've already started getting emails from some people who were upset a few weeks ago saying, there you go, get on with it, shut the beaches. There's no need to shut the beaches. We are perfectly capable of dealing with hundreds of thousands of people on the beaches. That's what we do. The reason that we had issues with our beaches was, as the Chief Exec explained, the perfect storm of 9 million people being furloughed, everything else being closed, the beach being the only thing open, fantastic weather, and add to that, pretty disgusting behaviours, and some of our staff not yet back into the full mode, and many of our seafront staff who had been taken on within the previous 10 days or so, obviously coming to terms with their role. And I should add, our refuse collectors having to have security because of the abuse that refuse collectors were getting in trying to empty the bins. So there was a really unpleasant environment of bad attitude that was going on at that point of time. In terms of the closure of the beach, you have to have some evidence that the beach is part of the cause or effect. But we're in a situation where no, we can't close the beach because it's busy. That is what we do. We are a tourist town, and we do need to manage the expectations of the public that we're not going to close the beach because it's busy, or we're not going to close car parks because there's people there and you can't social distance. Our message has been clear throughout since lockdown was lifted. If it's too busy, go home. If it's too busy for you, go home. It's not down to us to maintain a 2 metre or even a 1 metre social distance. That's down to the individual. In terms of the cycleway, yes, it's a 7-day notification period with a 6-month consultation period once the emergency or experimental traffic regulation order has come into play. The 4 weeks is about the timescale that the government expected implementation to begin after we were given the money, and has to be completed within a further 4 weeks. So we're running out of time to actually get tranche 1 proposals in place. They've all got to be in place about 3 weeks from now, which is a tall order for the team to get them in place before we move on to tranche 2 we're expecting in August. So you're right, Councillor Trent, when you have 7 days to actually notify what you're planning to do, and then there is a live consultation available on all of these schemes, and I would encourage people to fill them in. These cannot be made permanent. They have to be temporary, and they have to consult for 6 months. And after 6 months, if we decided that we wanted to make them permanent, we could, but we'd have to go through the full TRO process, which involves a full consultation. They have to be removed after 18 months maximum, but they can be made permanent more quickly if that is desire of the community. Thirdly, on the shielding, the government are stopping the shielding at the end of July. We still have the ability to support, because although Together We Can is being rolled into their business as usual customer service model, we still have contact with the people that we've been supporting, whether they're shielded group or non-shielded group. Many of the volunteers who have been supporting those individuals are maintaining a longer term relationship. We still have the vast majority of those volunteers who are still actively available for us to support people, and that support will remain. Everybody who is shielded has been written to by the government. We've been told to tell them that this support is stopping, that there won't be any more emergency food packages, but that they are eligible for enhanced online shopping opportunities, and they've all had direct confirmation from the government about that. But our systems are still there to help, advise, support, and be volunteers should they wish.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. I have a number of other people wishing to speak, so I would just ask that we try and keep questions and answers as short as possible, because we do have the rest of the agenda to get through as well. So I'll go now to Councillor Haynes. Councillor May Haynes.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, I know this is not a question, but I do want to respond to the issue that a previous speaker had actually said about awareness of consultation for the Emergency Active Travel Fund. And I have to say that in regard to one particular scheme, Evening Hill, I had actually told my residents about the scheme, that it was going to happen, and for them to start providing feedback, but then was promptly told off by an officer that I shouldn't have actually told my residents. So just to put that marker there, that apparently there was a 7-day consultation, but actually I was told I shouldn't have done that. So I don't need a response to that. It's just a comment. Just coming back to the points that Councillor Green had actually raised, and obviously representing Cather Cliffs, which covers most of the beaches that fall within what was the former borough of Poole. Anything that was going on the beaches on those 2 awful days and on the bank holiday weekend, you name it, I had an email about it. So I think what it comes down to is enforcement. And I think that we need to be rigorous and robust with our enforcement, particularly to do with overnight camping, because word of mouth, I think, sometimes is more powerful than any of us can imagine, i.e. one or two groups come down here, they camp overnight, they camp 2 nights, and they've got away with it. So they tell their friends, who then tell their friends, and then it kind of goes round that, well, you know what, yes, there is a risk, you might be asked to leave, but we got away with it. So you know what, you're going to get away with it. So I think we need to think about this, because we don't want to encourage this sort of behaviour, because there is a bylaw that says camping is not permitted on our beaches, and we need to step up the enforcement, be completely robust and rigorous with it, to send the message that if you try to camp on the beach, then you will be asked to leave because it's not permitted.
Yeah,
Thank you, Councillor Haynes.
Can I just reflect on that? I completely agree with you, Councillor Haynes. I mean, I think the issue is that it isn't something that that the funding up to now has actually been covering. It is something that perhaps when we look at the budgets for next year's seafront services, that we do have to look at, you know, whether the seafront budget has to have an overnight element to it. But I think, having been given the copies of the bylaws for both for Poole and Bournemouth and Christchurch, I was shocked that the bylaws are not as robust as you or I might think them to be. And it's one of the things I've raised with officers to say, when we do a review of beach management for 2021 and beyond, and there's lots of great ideas that residents have come in with, so why don't we do X, Y and Z? Absolutely, how we enforce and what we enforce are absolutely in there, and I would definitely encourage that.
Thank you. I've got 2 further speakers. Councillor Farquhar first.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Yes, no, I just wanted to go back to the parking side of things, and I thank the leader on a description of the realities on being on the ground of only 32 operational parking enforcement officers as opposed to what might be on paper, e.g. vacancies for 50. It's a very different situation. The reason I want to go back to that is that according to those figures, particularly on shift patterns, you could only expect, even at full complement, to have 15 to 17 parking enforcements in any one day. Consequently, having 18, as Councillor Green mentioned, seems to be on target for the operational deployment. But I wanted to take a personal sort of perspective as regards, because I was one of the councillors that responded to the cry from seafront officers to help and volunteer on that day. So I moved amongst the crowds, and they were a very different beast to what we normally expect in our tourist systems, and I think that's something that must very much be recognised, and it was recognised on the national news on a variety of channels. But what I'd like to say is that I spoke to some parking enforcement officers and saw the abuse that they were getting actually while I was speaking to them, and the officer which I spoke to had been previously in years gone by a victim of assault for just doing his job. So I just wanted to bring to the table here that our officers, and some of them being temporary staff to fulfil the requirements for litter picking and so on and so forth, get a tremendous amount of abuse from the nature of the individuals that occupied those beaches on the 2 weekends in question. And I've seen that, and I'd just like to thank them for actually putting up with that abuse and doing the job in very, very difficult conditions, and that's what I want to bring to the table there. The other thing which I just wanted to point on is it's a question of figures. 25% of seafront staff is not the correct figure. My understanding is that in the summer season we have 200. On the first weekend, whereby we responded as councillors to the appeal, I was told there was 25, which I work out as being 12.5% of our normal complement for a weekend that busy. So I just wanted to actually, if we're going to talk about percentages, figures, I think it's important that the public realise that we get it correct.
Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. There was no question there, so I'll move on to the next speaker, which is Councillor Brooke. Councillor Brooke.
Thank you, Chair. Just bring the video up. Yeah, it's just a few comments and a couple of questions. I'll be as quick as I can. It's very easy to be critical when one is looking back and seeing situations that may or may not have been predictable, and certainly people's behaviour on those occasions was not predictable. And I think when you read all the reports that we've had about COVID-19 and the way the Council has responded, you can see how it has actually taken on board the issues that have arisen and addressed them, and is still addressing them and looking ahead. And it's looking ahead that I would like to just raise a couple of questions. We're very fortunate in this area to have very, very low levels of COVID-19, and the spread of it is at probably one of the lowest levels in the country as a whole. But tracking and tracing is still obviously going to be very, very important, and is likely to become more important during the as we head in towards autumn and winter. And I was just wondering what information we could have on that, because very little was actually written in the report. So where are we at with our tracking and tracing? And secondly, there is a big fear that not only will there be a rise in cases as we head through winter, but it might well coincide with flu epidemic as well. And therefore, can I ask at this point in time, what preparations are being made to cope with that potential risk during the winter? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooke. I don't want us to stray too much into the territory of the Health Board, which is now back up and running. So I don't want to rerun things that they may well be running now that they're actually meeting again. So I wonder whether we focus on the first question rather than looking at how we're going to cope from a health point of view, because that is slightly outside of the remit for this board. But I don't know whether Councillor Slade, whether you want to come in on the first point.
So I would say that there is work being done, because there is a risk that the winter flu and this will collide, which is a problem. On the national track and trace, we know is only between 50 and 70% of the people who've got it are successfully having track and trace. That's something which is being led by Public Health England and not by the council. When we get our action cards and do our sort of tabletop exercises around how we respond to a local outbreak, which we should be starting to look at in the next couple of weeks, then we can explore the track and trace a bit more. But at the moment, it's not in our gift to do the track and trace. It's being done substantially.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. I have a couple of questions which I'll just come in now. It is a little bit retrospective, as Councillor Brooke pointed out, but we are the Overview and Scrutiny Board, so I think we do have a job to do some scrutiny, particularly if it helps us to learn lessons in the future. And it was just back to the major incident that was declared. I think we can all accept that there was a perfect storm which caused difficulty all around the country, and you know, we try and be prepared, but equally we have to deal with what is in front of us. The question, Councillor Slade, was about the actual major incident itself and the act of calling one. And I just wondered whether you were fully aware of the full consequences of what a major incident actually entailed and what the consequences of the major incident actually were.
Well, I think we've been really clear around the process through which this actually occurred. I did not declare a major incident, but as leader of the council, I'm the one that fronts up the decisions that are made by the council. So just to clarify that on the Wednesday, we obviously brought into play all of the getting the staff in place, making sure the toilets were open, getting security in place, being ready for a very, very busy few days. And on the first full day of that busyness, because if you recall, it started on the Tuesday afternoon, it got busy. The Wednesday was an exceptionally busy day. On that Wednesday, a SAG, a safety advisory group, was called, which was attended by senior officers from across organisations. Remember, that is, a SAG is not a council group, it's a council with police and other partners. Other partners were telling us at that SAG that they were beginning to find that things were getting exceptionally busy. including the hospitals, were reporting that their numbers of visitors were going up high. The number of calls to the various emergency services were increasing exponentially. We reported at that time that we were coping, but it was going in the wrong direction. Obviously, as I've explained, visitors kept arriving throughout the afternoon and evening, which is unusual. And the behaviours that were seen were exceptional and not good. A decision was made on the Wednesday afternoon to hold another emergency meeting on the Thursday morning, a multi-agency meeting that was chaired, I believe, by Bill Cotton as the corporate director. And that group meeting, that tactical coordinating group, took the decision collectively that it was appropriate to go forward with a major incident in standby. That was a technical, that is the opportunity to operationally bring your services together and prioritise it over and above the rest of your daily work, and enables those people to flag that there is a problem occurring here. That was reconfirmed later on in the day, and as a result of calling the major incident, the benefit of doing that, because you talk about did I realise the consequences? Yes, the consequences of the major incident is that we were able to have armed police on standby who were able to deal with some pretty disgusting and very dangerous incidents. We had 3 stabbings, you'll recall, that night. We hadn't had our police available to us on hand. That might have been more tragic. We were able to get the Coast Guards to be available to us, because if you remember, the RNLI weren't fully operational, and when you've got high numbers of people who have potentially been drinking in the hot sun by the water, there's another potential risk. So by having the maritime agencies available for us, the highways agency brought in so that we could actually look towards how we manage the road signage and networks, the hospitals being able to be on standby in case there is an incident where there was any casualties. So the consequences are that everybody was able to work together rather than working in their own individual silos. And that is why the decision was taken to declare the major incident and to keep the major incident in standby mode over the summer, so that we're able to press go in the event that in the coming weeks we feel that it's going to be a risk again. So, you know, just had clarification, the RNLI, while they didn't have their lifeguards on duty on the beaches, they were sweeping the bay from their boats, which obviously, you know, to make sure that the bay was safe. So, you know, I think that the declaration of a major incident was absolutely not an overreaction, as some have suggested. It was an operational decision by the senior people, and we're talking the chief operating officers of the hospitals, assistant chief constables, corporate directors of the council, who collectively decided that for the area, and this also included officers from Dorset Council who sit on this as well, for the protection of the public, safety and health, it was the right thing to do.
Thank you very much for that. I mean, it's difficult to know, isn't it, exactly what everybody's thoughts are at the time, and of course it's very easy for those that make decisions to say different things afterwards. I've heard many reports that there were a number of people involved in that discussion that were not as keen to declare the major incident.
Maybe they'd like to go public then.
Well,
perhaps they'd like to go public.
Perhaps, and of course one of the consequences which I'd heard was and you mentioned actually in there, was around the hospitals themselves. The hospitals then automatically go into a major incident mode themselves, and I've heard lots and lots of reports of a very rapid discharge of patients from both Poole and Bournemouth Hospital.
That's actually untrue.
Which Chief Executive.
Sorry, Chairman, just before you go any further, we have had that cleared with Debbie Fleming, the Chief Executive of the Hospital Trust. Those allegations are absolutely not founded. They are not true. And I just wanted to cut across before you complete it, because they were not true.
That's different from an email that I'd had, but we can get into that later. I mean, the one question I would like to ask is that, bearing in mind it was called in the end very late on in the day, if you had to do it again, would you still make the decision, knowing all of the negative publicity that we got as well? Would you still go along with calling the major incident?
So first of all, I will just say that the MP for the area has been advised that that was a false allegation. So he is aware. So if your information has come from there, he is aware. He was told personally by Debbie Fleming that that is not true. That has been confirmed by at the highest possible level. And the reality is, I don't believe we will need to be in that position because we are in a major incident and standby mode for the rest of the summer. So if there is the merest hint that we're heading in that direction, all of the agencies are ready to go, and they are all willing to go, and they all recognise the benefit of doing it. And I think had we called it 5 hours earlier, maybe we would have been in a different position, but I don't think that there would have been any significant difference because the planning to start calling it happened on the Wednesday afternoon and it was called on the Thursday lunchtime. We were lucky that the weather started to change on the Friday afternoon. If it hadn't, then we would have been able to see how effective it would have been over the coming days. As it turned out, the weather started to change and nature helped us a little bit, but we won't know whether the process on the Friday and Saturday would have been eased. What I do know is that I had a traffic enforcement officer came to me on the Friday and said, thank you so much for what you did in calling the major incident. I said, it wasn't me, it was our officers. He said, because I had to call my panic button when I was being set upon by people who had been parking on double yellow lines. And by pressing my panic button, police officers were there within a matter of less than a minute to support me. And I wouldn't have had that before. So for that reason only, I am pleased we made that decision.
Thank you very much. I have one final question, I think, from Councillor Green. Nicola Green.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Leader, for leading in, because that's actually exactly what I'd like to pick up on. And it's about whether I think at the time clearly everybody was really supportive and quite correctly of all the public sector and other bodies which were involved, council employees and so on. But it is right to reflect now. And the questions really that I'm asking are about whether that was the right and the proportionate lever to pull. So I'd just like to know really kind of around that. Can you confirm whether any ambulances were put on standby solely for application during the major incident, which could otherwise have been deployed about their normal business? And likewise, in advance of taking the decision, whether you sought any further assistance from the police and especially from the PCC, which might have obviated the need to call the major incident. And therefore, would the dispersal order, which was issued, I believe, on Thursday afternoon, perhaps have been sufficient to get the police response in place and might have saved other public sector bodies their unnecessary pressures?
So I don't know the answer to whether ambulance was put on standby specifically, but in the event of a 999 call, an ambulance would go to 999 call. You know, so I can't answer that. I'm sure we could get that information from SWAST if we needed to. If you ask what advice did I take, I'll repeat. I did not take this decision. This decision was taken by the Local Resilience Forum, which is chaired by the police, which had Bill Cotton as our representative on it, and the decision was taken by the operational leads, including the police, who were absolutely part of the decision-making process. They were part of this. So whether the police commissioner was supportive or not is sort of irrelevant, because the police commissioner is not operational. His job is to hold the chief constable to account. The chief constable is the operational lead, and the police were supportive of calling the incident and were part of the calling. It was a Local Resilience Forum who actually made the announcement. As is usual, the leader goes on the TV to defend what the council has done, but I did not sign anything off because it's not a leader decision, it was an operational decision.
So the question that I actually asked was not about advice, it was whether you sought assistance from the police and the PCC in advance, specifically around the dispersal.
So a safety advisory group was called on the Wednesday, on the first day of the incident, which involved the police. So the police were giving assistance, and we were working in a multi-agency approach in the way that we could without calling a major incident. The next step up the line was, we need to actually be able to work more robustly in a single team, and that's why it was stepped up the following day to a major incident.
Okay, so going back to the last question I asked, which is, would the dispersal order and other work directly with the police have saved the need for a major incident to be called and potentially unnecessary pressures? Because it's very clear to me now that we don't know what those pressures are. We don't know currently whether ambulances were put on standby, and clearly there is some question over how the hospitals might have responded, and therefore, one always seeks to do to take the most straightforward approach, okay, which might have been just to be working with the police. So what I'm asking is whether going forward we could learn the lessons, or at least know the facts about how this impacted on other public sector bodies, because if we don't get that right, if we don't have that information, we won't necessarily know in the future whether this is the right lever to be pulling.
This was an exceptional situation that had been stepped up. The reality of the situation is that the system took a decision. I'm going to ask Bill, who actually was at the meeting, to clarify who was at the meeting, but I know that the Chief Operating Officer of Bournemouth Hospital, was actively involved in this decision and told me himself that it was the right decision to take. The dispersal orders were used anyway. Even with the major incident, there was still a dispersal order used, and that remains something that police always have at their disposal. So, Bill, can I ask you just to clarify, because I think there's some confusion about who took the decision and when, and what would have been different if we hadn't taken the decision. My understanding is that this was a collective decision taken because it was the next escalation up the ladder.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I can exactly that. So on the call that I chaired, it was the local chief superintendent from the police, who looks after all operational policing across BCP. It was the Gold Fire and Rescue. It was the chief operating officer from the hospital, etc. Then when we had the meeting the following day, it was the assistant chief constable, and again all senior officers from across all the emergency services, Network Rail, Highways Agency, British Transport Police, etc., etc. So there's probably about 20 agencies involved. And it was a collective decision. Everybody recognises that each of their respective organisations is under pressure, and the only way forward is to work collectively in through the local resilience forum, which has through the emergency planning process, has a lot of very well rehearsed emergency planning scenarios that we all work to and protocols that we work to.
Thank you very much. Councillor Nicola Green, are we done?
Yeah, it was just a comment, Chairman. I understand it's been set out very, very clearly how the decision was taken and with the information which was available at the time. Going back to the question that you raised, it's about now looking back and saying, knowing what we know, would we do the same again? Councillor Slade has already answered it, but I just think we need to be absolutely clear about what the impact has been of taking that decision, so that any future decision is taken in the knowledge of what happened previously.
And so just to clarify, all hotels and campsites were closed, all bars and restaurants were closed, 9 million people were off work. Some of our staff were still off work due to their own illness. And we've reduced budgets to try and cope. And every other organisation also had the same situation. So the police have people who were shielded, the ambulance, everybody, we had no hour in a lie. So I don't actually think the circumstance is ever going to be quite the same again. Because if we were to have an incident tomorrow, where we hit 35 degrees, actually an awful lot of people are now back at work. If they're in the retail sector, if they're in the hospitality sector, most people are being asked to return to work. There are theme parks open. There are swimming pools opening next week. There are pubs and restaurants and hotels open. So it was a moment in time that I don't think actually the requirement for a major incident is likely to happen. And I think that everyone involved in dealing with those couple of days actually served us incredibly well. We've had virtually every group of staff, whether they be beach staff, refuse staff, parking enforcement staff, abused and assaulted That's not a normal environment. And you know, we have to hope that that never happens again. But I think that if I am sure that if the corporate director was in the same position again, that he would work with his team across the system, and if they feel the need to call a major incident again, I will support their decision to do so. But it is their decision to do so as operational leads. Thank you, Councillor Slade. I'm very conscious that we've got other guests which are going to give us a bit more of information about what they're up to as well. So I would like to move on unless there are anything else to come. Councillor Haynes, you wish to come in finally?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just by way of wrapping up, just listening to the discussion that has actually gone on, I would like to propose a recommendation which I will now put on there it is. Put on the instant message bar, and it is, I'll read it out. Cabinet seeks to bring in your rigorous, responsive and robust enforcement action into current operational practices, particularly in regard to parking and overnight camping on beaches.
Chair, can I respond to that?
As long as it's quick.
Yeah, well, I have already clarified that we're going to be doing a complete review of beach and beach management, which will be starting probably in the autumn, so that we're ready to go for the new year. So that when we go into the next season, we've actually addressed those things. And I think that the best route forward would be to set up a working group that actually allows us to do that as a cabinet working group. And that's something I've already discussed with the service directors. So,
Councillor Haynes, you wish to come back? I believe the spirit of Councillor Haynes' recommendation is that it might well be a bit late by then, but Councillor Haynes.
Yes, Chair. You have actually got the meaning behind the recommendation, which is that in response to what Councillor Slade has said, that a review will happen. But I'm very concerned because obviously COVID is still with us, and we will see more visitors to our beaches than normal. Hopefully they will be better behaved visitors as well. So I think the concern is for the here and now, and I personally wouldn't like to wait, and I think that we should actually do the enforcement, so hence the recommendation.
Yeah, let me just come back then, because I have already over the weekend advised all councillors, I'm sure you've read it, and I'm sure that the publicity is going out, but we have actually done that, so you'll be aware that clamping and towing away is actually now been approved, and we're actually expecting to start that within a matter of weeks. It can't happen any quicker than that, because you actually have to purchase the equipment and have the staff trained and have the contract in place. So that is already happening. Overnight camping at the beaches, we have a bylaw. The bylaw is far more restrictive than you think. I will gladly send it to you. The police can only enforce when somebody has been there 23 hours and 59 minutes. So all we can do is ask people to move along. And if you do that at 10 o'clock at night, they'll say, it's all right, we're not stopping. So it is not as easy as you think. We also have campsites and hotels now open. So, by all means, ask Cabinet to bring in year rigorous response. But by the time any process was put in place, it would be the end of the season anyway. We're already at the end of July. So I think the realistic and sensible way forward is that officers are listening. Officers have been responding and changing practices and enhancing their service throughout the season. The way forward is to actually look and saying, how is it that 3 towns who have been used to dealing with high levels of visitors were in this situation? Actually, for years and years, these processes have been exactly the same. So nothing changed this year. The current administration didn't change anything. We continued the same processes that have been in place under the previous councils. So by all means, ask Cabinet to do something. But the reality is officers aren't going to have the capacity to do that while we're in the middle of the season. So I think it's an unrealistic ask at this point.
I do have a note on the message to say that Councillor Nicola Green is happy to second. With respect, Councillor Slade, we have found in the past, and we're trying to be helpful, that recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Board to Cabinet quite often help to trigger responses. So you mentioned, for instance, the very rapid change and very welcome change that you're making in parking enforcement. That has happened because we needed to to do something about it. So, you know, the hope is, I suppose, that if you bring something to the on this basis, that we might well find a way. I would perhaps delicately suggest.
With respect, Chair, I think it would be very unfair and unprofessional of you to suggest that it was because of overview and scrutiny that those changes happened. Those changes happened because the administration and the officers have worked incredibly hard to move the budgets around to make sure it happened. I'm sure your contribution has been very valuable, but I don't think it would be fair or appropriate to take the credit for the improved things that the administration is doing. I think it's a collective responsibility, and I think taking the credit for it is a little unfair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Slade. That's not entirely what I said at all. It was more about pressure quite often leads to response. But I have Councillor Trent that wishes to come in on this. We now have a recommendation which has been proposed and seconded. Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really puzzled by this being put. The answer's being given that it's all in hand, it's all being looked at. This is almost like saying when you've crossed the road safely, and saying, I propose that you cross the road safely or something. It seems to me that this is just a little bit of window dressing and a bit of nonsense, and I can't support what is just basically just opportunistic headline grabbing or something like that. It's all in hand, so as far as I can see, there is absolutely no point in putting this proposal forward.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Councillor Mike Green.
Far more constructively than...
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mike Green.
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to speak on that, but I feel after this one that I must. We had the Maybank holiday. We were promised everything was going to be in hand. We then had that disaster in June. So I am very happy to be supporting this recommendation.
Thank you very much. I'm conscious of time and the fact that we have another agenda item to go on to. So unless there are no further speakers on this, it seems to me to be a recommendation to Cabinet, which is, you know, hopefully entirely helpful. But you know, I'll leave colleagues to make their own judgments on that. Claire, could I ask you? I've got no further indications to speak to take a vote on this, unless. Well, yes, I think it's probably best that we go to vote on this one. Claire.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll call out each board member's name, and if you could respond with for, against or abstain, please. Councillor Broadhead?
For.
Councillor Haynes?
For.
Councillor Anderson?
For.
Councillor Bartlett?
Against.
Councillor Brooke?
Against.
Councillor Earl?
Against.
Councillor Farquhar?
Against.
Councillor Fear?
For.
Councillor Mike Green?
For.
Councillor Nicola Green?
For.
Councillor Iyengar?
For.
Councillor Mellor?
For.
Councillor Rigby?
Against.
Councillor Trent?
Against.
That's 8 in favour and 6 against.
If I may, Chair, I'd like my vote recorded, please.
Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. Okay, I will take that recommendation to Cabinet in the spirit that we always do to try and help to improve. Colleagues, will now thank you very much to the Leader and to the Chief Executive. That is the end of the item on the Council's direct response to the COVID-19 ongoing situation. I'll now move to item 10, which is a bit of a wider discussion, in particular relating to the local economy and our tourism sectors, who are now slowly but surely emerging from their lockdown, and we've invited a number of guests from various different outside agencies locally to speak quite often directly on behalf of their respective sectors to give us a bit of a flavour, 5 or 10 minutes each, of how they're getting on, and in particular whether they have any asks or requests that they would look at from the council that we can then move forward and try and assist with. Unless I hear otherwise, we had a similar situation before where we had a number of guests and we took them in turn and then asked questions. What I'm intending to do with this particular item, we've got 4 representatives from the various either the bids or the bid steering group in Christchurch. I was intending to invite each of them to have 5 or 10 minutes each and take them in turn, and then we can maybe ask questions of them collectively afterwards, unless colleagues aren't particularly happy with that issue. But it seems a bit more sensible rather than doing a one-on-one, and that hopefully we can then get a bit of a flavour of the industry as a whole, and then perhaps target specific questions that we may have to the individuals. So unless there's any dissent from that, I will then introduce our first guest, who is Steve Riley, who is the director of the Poole Business Improvement District, to talk first. And again, I'll ask this for all of them. The platform is yours. Please let us know how you're getting on briefly in the industry since things have started to emerge, and then again, in particular, what we can do to help you. So I'll pass over to Steve. Thank you very much for joining us, Steve.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Just another way of introduction. I'm Steve Riley. I'm a director with Poole Bid, and also currently managing or project managing the day-to-day operations of the bid. And I've got an update just to go through with you. Happy to take any questions at the end. It may be once we've all spoke. So COVID-19 has brought many challenges for businesses, and Poole Bid has set a clear focus to support the immediate future. This ranged initially contacting businesses directly regards grants that may be available, supporting BCP's own communications. We also ensured that messages received by the bids or to bids from the Cabinet Office Communications team were then sent out to the levy payers, and also done our own newsletters as we got ready to reopen, because there were many suppliers that wanted to put their products in front of the, shall we say, the businesses ready for reopening. We've also supported by supplying distancing graphics for the businesses to build onto the back of what the council have already done. We've supplied over £3,000 worth to levy payers so far, and that's been funded by the bids. For both reopenings, that's to do with retail and hospitality. We supplied ambassadors on the ground to ensure the first few days went smoothly. Example would be the level crossing in Poole. Wasn't too sure how that would go, so we arranged to have some ambassadors on the ground just to support that, and I think they were well received by the public and also the businesses. Also, as part of reopening in both areas, we arranged for teams of volunteers to de-weed parts of the high street, and also when hospitality reopened, we funded the cleaning of the alleyways along the quay. They've been used as the toilets by the public during lockdown, and this is part of our decision to support the businesses directly and stuff that impacts them and makes it a good area to come and visit. And building into that, it's about going back to basics. You know, a lot of retailers and hospitality, the businesses put a lot of effort in having a basics program, a very minimum standards, and that's what we want to try and get to. So even building into that, we're this week starting a community project with HSBC, and I'm not sure dilapidated is the right term, but we've got a number of utility boxes, lampposts, etc. on the high street that probably haven't been painted in a long time, and HSBC are working with us in getting these painted and to try and restore a bit of pride back into the area. And once again, nothing new, but the telephone kiosks where they've been shut down and haven't been looked like they've been clean for some time. We've been in touch with the people that site those, and they're coming into the town during the course of this week to do a deep clean. Once again, trying to build confidence and making it a place to come and visit. We've worked as part of the R3 task force, supplying both feedback and ideas on challenges and opportunities for the area. Our communication with the levy payers has increased greatly, and we've played a key role in trying to assist with the ETRO along the old High Street and Quay. As you'll be aware, there's mixed views on this. The limited consultation has given some businesses real issues. The land train would be an example. That they've been impacted greatly, and obviously it was mentioned earlier on about the 7-day process. The scheme has enabled some businesses to gain from additional seating areas. There are also a number that are waiting for legislation to pass. Hopefully today, that may well give some more business some outside areas. So actually along the quay area, you will see that there's many businesses, or a number of businesses, that have got outside dining areas already in place, and I think the feedback from the public on those is that they're glad to see them. Obviously, it's lovely in the summer. We've got a challenge of what's going to happen in the winter to build onto that. But actually building into that, obviously a number of other businesses have seen their the footfall or traffic impact their businesses. So we actually had a site meeting in the area last week with council officers, and it's been agreed that we can introduce some arts and crafts and locally produced food stalls to try and bring some footfall. So we've got a lovely area that's been pedestrianised at this stage, and we just need to work on trying to get, make the most of that and attract people to the area. So we expect to start landing that in August, which is should be a good advantage. We do believe there's an opportunity around trying to build further reasons to visit the area. We've been invited to an online meeting with the National Trust and Annie Riley. There is no connection with myself, but she's the head of producing at Heritage Open Days, and they're looking for some more pilot towns for their time machine project. Obviously this builds into the Heritage Action Zone funding potentially, so it'll be good to discuss that with them, which is on Wednesday. Even if we are unable to gain entry as a pilot, there is a potential to build on the resources we already have. An example will be the Cockleshell Trail that is in place. While lots of people mention the trail, very few can tell you the details around it. Simple signage may help. So once again, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're trying to do very simple things with what we've already got. With regards to other areas in the town, the Dolphin Centre is still managing to recruit new tenants. We have the newly relaunched Bills opening on the 1st of August as well. We are also working on some window dressing projects for some of the empty units in the High Street. These are expected to land over the coming 2 weeks as well. We now have the benefit of the long-awaited CSAS officers arriving into the town. This will help with safe and secure. We also have the DISC ASB reporting system ready to go live, and we'll be launching that along the same time as Coastal launching it as well. It is the same system, so I know everyone's got great hopes for that in trying to manage ASB. We've also been able to improve the Shopwatch radio system. This will be at a lower cost and give greater flexibility with everyone, so they can hire it for a month at a time, which will help react to hotspot areas, and that will obviously build in any support for the bus station as well. As you'll be aware, the situation regards levy collection is unclear. This is the same for many bids across the country. Levy bills were sent out mid-June as they were delayed as part of trying to support businesses. We expect that the August payment report will give some indication of what the collection percentage may be. It's interesting so far that independents are the biggest paying group by type rather than value, and that was somewhat surprising. As regards the business themselves, many of the independents are continuing to try and adapt. Many are concerned for the coming months as they will not have built up enough buffer through the normal strong summer months to see them across the winter. Small scale weekend events may well be an opportunity. Earlier agreement on what this may look like is needed. Once again, some businesses are discussing what will Christmas look like. They have some good ideas. Support to get behind these will be vital. To summarise, the traders are doing the best they can in the circumstances. Engagement amongst stakeholders is developing from a low blazing pool. Swiftness to react is key. Some good examples coming down from other towns and bids. How do we interpret these in the BCP area? These include issues around funding. Some areas, particularly Liverpool, have done a great job in supporting some areas and putting the funds in. And there's some good best practices coming around. We received last week a best practice outside seating licensing from the Bid Foundation, and that sort of thing is a good blueprint of potentially what we can be looking at. But in fairness to John and his team, when we've engaged in conversations, they have been listening to what we've been saying. So we just need to keep that dialogue going, but actually hopefully be a bit swifter in trying to get some of the simple wins landed. And that's the summary for here.
Thank you very much, Steve. It's very interesting to hear how we're all coping, and a few very good ideas in there as well. I'll save questions for the economic recovery side, the bids, till 1, if I may. In which case, I'll move on to the next speakers, who are representatives from the Bournemouth Town Centre bid. Martin Davies, the chairman, and Paul Kinvig, the chief operating officer. I don't know who's speaking or whether you're doing a bit of a tag team offer, but I will open it up to you, Martin and Paul. Thank you for coming back.
Thank you, Philip. As always, it is a bit of a tag team thing. So Martin's just going to do a very quick overview, and I'll go into some of the more specifics of maybe challenges, observations, and ways in which we can further work together, I think.
Thank you very much. Martin, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, thank you, Chairman. First things first, it's been a difficult time, and I think that as far as ONS are concerned, the consensus from the business community in the town centre is that the council have by and large done a pretty good job. I mean, as an entirely non-political point, genuinely, the decision-making processes in government in this country aren't necessarily equipped to cope with a situation that's been as rapidly developing and as rapidly evolving as COVID-19 crisis. And I think across the authority, elected members, officers collectively, you deserve praise for the speed with which you have managed to deal with things, the way in which the grants have been handed out, the support and the partnership working that we've experienced in areas like the Shop Local, Stay Local campaign that we've done with you and with Paul Bid, the signage, the town centre, the steps for reopening. Yeah, it's not perfect and there have been hiccups along the way, but when you look at a lot of other areas in the country and compare BCP to other areas, I think we've done pretty well. The other sort of overview thing I'd like to just touch on briefly before Paul comes to the detail is the issue of the high street and the future of the town centre. I think it would be a mistake to think that COVID-19 has somehow of itself changed for all time the future of the town centre. But I do think that it's probably accelerated a process that was already happening. That with the issues with the town centre have been there for several years or more. The issues with retail, and we've rehearsed them at previous ONS committees over time, and COVID's thrown all of that into focus. It's really accelerated the economic pressure on businesses. But by the same token, I think that the thing I want to take forward is the overview going forward, and the strategic thing for us together is that it's also given the opportunity to react to that and to look at where town centres go and what our town centre is meant to be. A process of gradual decline has been rather forced into confronting it more rapidly. And amongst the issues I think we need to look at are what is a town centre going to mean going forward? It's not going to stay as it is. How big an offer is retail going to be? What are we going to look at to replace that? Are we going to look at a town centre where people are encouraged more to live and work closer together, where there's less commuting, where there's less transport pressures, more green solutions? I think we've got a fabulous opportunity to take what is a great place and make it better, and I hope we can work together to do that. And Paul is going to throw some of the detail into that. But those really are, without wanting to take up too much time, those are my main points really. Thank you very much for your support to date for the business community, and let's keep going and pull together for the future and really make something exciting happen. Mr. Kinvig.
Thank you, Martin, for that rallying call. Paul.
Yes, I feel my thunder's gone. Practically, the past 13, 14 weeks have been an absolute watershed as far as businesses in the town centre are concerned. And I'd add my voice to what Martin said in the sense that, has the issue with COVID of itself fundamentally changed? No. Has it accelerated? Absolutely. Now that throws up some really interesting issues for any of us who are involved in the life and health of any town centre or any district or anywhere where it would be. As far as we've been concerned, we had to move very quickly in the initial stages to guiding and helping businesses through the minefield of grants, guidance, what they could and couldn't do as far as their staff were concerned. And so our role very much in those first few weeks was about information dissemination. And I would echo what Martin said. The vast majority of people that we've spoken to regarding both the funds and the grants, etc., have been very complimentary about both the speed and the way in which it was done. I would lay a bit of a challenge here that in the second round of this discretionary fund, communication and speed is of the absolute essence. That, you know, if there is a change in the guidance or the criteria, whatever we have to do to get that out to those businesses who either fell through the cracks or didn't get in the first round because they simply didn't qualify for the criteria but may do now, is of vital importance, because there are some significant sectors within the town centre businesses who, I don't know the details, so this is just a plea more than anything else, who could really do with help from that discretionary fund as long as they qualify. So communication speed is hugely important there. As the lockdown then began to ease and people started needing to come back, and whilst there was some significant issues regarding the inability to produce things like events that would drive footfall, etc. So then what we became really involved in was practically helping those businesses. So that ranged from free HR advice to our levy payers through to the supply of queuing stickers. Over 300 are now out in the town centre, which we worked with BCP officers on in terms of their placement. This week sees the distribution and issue of "Great to see you shopping, thank you for wearing a mask" window vinyls to all our levy payers who want them. Because again, we feel it's better to encourage and say thank you for wearing the mask rather than potentially build up some confrontation for those people who maybe are against it or don't like the instruction. We've also, the Stay Local, Spend Local campaign has been incredibly successful. It moved initially from supporting local business, those that were open during lockdown and could do, essential businesses, those office sector businesses, for example, working from home, through now to highlighting both retail and hospitality through a major project with the Daily Echo. Now, the value of that overall is into the tens of thousands of pounds to both the hospitality sector and to the retail sector, but those have been free to our levy payers. And it's been great to work with BCP and with Pool Bid on that. So that's kind of been the support. I'd echo a lot of what Steve has said in terms of best practice, etc. But I'm conscious of time, so let me just focus on three core issues, I think, that would be helpful, Philip, in terms of this discussion. It's no doubt, I don't think, to anybody that the single utmost importance of people returning to town centres, whether those are visitors or residents or workers, is the issue of safety and security. Now, there was some significant work done prior to lockdown and, in fairness, during lockdown by the Homelessness Partnership, and there was some significantly positive multi-agency working going on for both engagement and enforcement. Operation Luscombe was part of that. And we saw some significant shifts in terms of the lack of some of those issues. As lockdown has eased, I'm glad to say that the partnership working has continued, and we're still seeing some significant falls in some areas, in some of those core places, you know, things like begging, antisocial behaviour, etc. What is apparent, though, is that as soon as there are major incidents in Bournemouth, and I don't mean the incidents, for example, such as the beach issues, but certainly on things like, appallingly and sadly, whether it's major drug incidents or murders, etc., the resource, by definition and obviously, tends to get diverted. So what that then means is that you do see increases and spikes when that resource is diverted. The single biggest issue in all the research is about safety and security. It's not just about antisocial behaviour and aggressive begging, etc., but obviously in terms of the safety issues that shops are taking. And I would, again, commend the shops and the businesses in Bournemouth who have taken significant steps to keep their staff and our customers safe. So the challenge we've all got, and this isn't whether it's just the local authority, this is the BID, the police, the local authority and other people involved, is how do we best maximise, how do we best A, utilise the resource and B, increase it? And I think that's a real challenge for us all going forward, Philip, in terms of the town centre, because we're going to attract people in and or have an increase of people living there. This safety and security issue with multi-agency working and partnership going forward is an absolute must. We can't not do it. So I think that's an issue for our retailers in terms of retail crime and for our visitors in terms of feeling safe. The second issue regarding all of this is, I'll cover it under a general issue of development. And by that I mean, what do we want our town centre to look like? And how quickly can we react and respond? A town plan, for example, that was initially done quite a number of years ago and then refreshed, but then we have not only major economic and purchasing habit changes, we then have COVID-19, means that what the town centre looked like going forward, as Martin rightly said at the beginning, is going to change and change more quickly than I think any of us really thought it would, even though that change was inevitable. The challenge is to try and have a planning and highways process that actually is quick enough to be able to change and react to what is going on in terms of what the town centres currently need. Now, I absolutely and fundamentally recognise the challenges that local authorities have when you have a local plan that drives a planning policy, and that's very simplistic, but I hope you understand what I mean by that. And I do know, because I've been told, that there is a review of that local plan that will then again potentially change and look at the planning policy, which will help. But as best I understand it, and I don't think you guys have got any way of changing this, that could be 2 years away. Now, in the past 6 months, we've seen A, the effect of what COVID's had on businesses, but B, we've also seen the wonderful way in which local authorities have been able to work together internally across department and actually move really quickly and innovatively and nimbly. And I suppose the plea from us on that side of things is whatever can be done to sit round a table with some of the people involved and to become as flexible and as nimble and as innovative as you can be in order to encourage life and development again within the town centre that is different from what it used to be, because it will be, would be hugely, hugely welcomed. So I think there's a challenge again for all of us there. And then thirdly and finally, it's a strange one from me because I do tend to have a little bit of the vision about what's the vision for the town centre, and I and Martin have been pushing this, and so has all of the bid. The plea is for officers through the bids and for politicians through their wards to actually go, what support do the businesses need now? It is right that we have a vision for the next 3, 5, 10 years, but there are many businesses that don't know if they're going to be here in the next 3, 5, 10 weeks, let alone months. So whatever support multi-agency working can give to the businesses that can get to them quickly, and that may mean something as easily as allowing outdoor seating. And again, I'd echo Steve's issue here in terms of John and his team have done incredibly well in working within what has been a strange government approach to this. But that kind of practical help, it's not in our territory, but what can be done on the beach to support those beach businesses? What can be done in terms of pavement licenses and working together to help those practical businesses that need it now, not just have let's have a 3, 5, 10 year vision as much as that is needed. So we as a bid have had to be incredibly nimble over the past 13 weeks in terms of going from what you would normally do, which is events, safety, security, clean and green, driving, footfall, etc., because that we can't do that at the moment. We've had to be really nimble in the support of the businesses. I think together, the kind of partnership working that we've got in all those 3 areas that I've outlined, innovation, being nimble and flexible, and it being really focused and outside of any particular strategy or whatever, is going to be hugely, hugely important.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Paul. That was some really useful nuggets again in there. So I have two more speakers from the bids or prospective bids. So I'll next bring in Paul Clark from the coastal bid. Welcome, Paul.
Mr. Chair.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Sorry, my apologies. I'm currently running the hotel, and due to staffing, I'm actually doing reception, etc. So on behalf of my colleagues, a lot of it I would actually resonate, especially the support from the council. The levy payers have been very pleased with the quick response of grants being paid. As we have as a coastal bid, been fortunate enough to have the business grant paid to us as well to support our levy payers of £10,000. I'm just going to go through a few points, just really from a support perspective. The first thing is more around, we're doing a lot of campaigning locally, and I think the town centre bid have done fantastic, as has the pool bids. I think it'd be really good just to really aim in on to make a lot more brighter, more positive things around the beach and the local area and what we're actually doing. Being a hotel manager of the Carlton Eastcliff Courts Hotel and having what I would call the first busy weekend since we've reopened, it's very noticeable how many people were either supposed to be on a cruise or in Mexico or on a honeymoon or abroad somewhere that have actually loved coming to Bournemouth because it's actually even made their stay better because of the environment and the coastal areas and the beach, or it's been comparable, and obviously they've had the joys of looking at the cruise liners out on the beach, which they thought they might have been on, but they've actually had a really good time. The Eat Out to Help Out scheme, encourage the local to spread the week. Again, this is a very good initiative, and we're hopeful to be working with the town centre bid as well as the pool bids to put some money behind this over the coming weeks to support the midweek restaurateurs and pubs and like-minded hoteliers. And it'd just be really a request or a suggestion that if there's any opportunity of reducing parking costs after 3 p.m. to facilitate that even more for our local businesses and also for the public, I think that would be a very good opportunity to sort of ring fence what we are hoping to do as the bids and putting money behind supporting and advertising the relevant areas to be open. And I don't believe it would be much of a huge cost, certainly from a local conurbation, and increasing the business for everyone. The second point was it's very encouraging to see what's happened on Poole Quay. Everyone has their opinions, and I think it's certainly the right thing to do at the moment. And it's really from a coastal bid perspective, in particular areas like Westbourne and Boscombe and Southbourne more so, whether there was any plans for a similar initiatives to happen, which we would not be against. It's more around is there any plans for that to happen, either for a day a week or a couple of days a week, or is there plans for it not to happen? Because we'd really appreciate proactive communication if it was to occur, so that we can be embracing it and making it work for everyone to grow their business and ensure it's run fluidly. Traders, one of it, we've already touched on it, my colleagues at the pool bid have already touched on the fact that they are embracing the disc system. That's one of our biggest opportunities that levy payers have made clear to us, and that whilst we're going through this tough time for all of us, we are anticipating and are already seeing increased crime and antisocial behaviour. Personally, I've had Slade taken off my roof at one of my hotels in the last few days. And the disc system is something that we're embracing and implementing over the next few weeks, which is going to be a fantastic tool for everyone. And from a support perspective, I'd greatly appreciate the council embracing that with us and ensuring that the relevant PR and marketing of it going out to local areas is there, so we can all embrace this opportunity to make Bournemouth safer and continue with that really good relationship. And the police are very, very keen about what we're doing, and we are funding this for the first year, as is the pool bid as well. So we're funding it on behalf of the levy payers, which ultimately is a great benefit to the town as well. In respect of the pavement licenses in the areas, I think we all agree this is a fantastic opportunity for people that choose to do it, and we'd be very grateful if there's a way of communicating more more information on this to make it nice and easy for those that would choose to want to take part of this, how they actually do it, and what they need to do. We just feel there's an opportunity to maybe communicate it a lot better. Because our bid manager Fiona seems to be quite difficult for her to get that information on behalf of the levy payers, and if there's an opportunity or forum where we can share that more openly, that'd be fantastic. Talking about Christmas, it's I know we have raised it before, but I just wanted to make sure it was in this domain in respect to Christmas. So the infrastructure is some of the areas with regards to power, and thus ensuring that we have Christmas lights in the various areas is something that we need to be addressed. I mean, I'll send a separate note about it, but certainly I know in Westbourne and Southbourne, we haven't had sufficient power in order to facilitate the lights to actually work and make them better and to provide what we need to do. So if I could just put that on there for the minutes, and for maybe someone to liaise with Fiona, our bid manager, to understand what needs doing. Whilst it's a small thing at the moment, we're all aiming to have a positive Christmas period, hopefully, and it will make a big difference if we're in a position to fund things to happen during that period as well. Another point we just wanted to understand was, from a council's perspective, what plans have been made or what are anticipated to happen should there be a second wave, and if they are, could they be shared, so again we can be very proactive in working with them to support us as part of the business community to make sure that our levy payers are informed, and we can be proactive. We're all hoping it doesn't happen, but of course it'd be good to be in a position where we're more prepared to understand what might happen, what the council might be doing differently. And I know that we spoke, I listened in earlier about the major incident being declared. No, not that we'd want that to happen in the future, but if that was to happen, how would that affect us as individuals, as hoteliers and restaurateurs and what have you? What way may we be asked to do if that was to be the case? Being a hotel manager, I think what's important in this forum maybe is to give you a quick update on hotels. I can factually tell you that last weekend, Bournemouth was at an occupancy of 86%. That's the busiest day that we've probably had in the town since most hotels reopened on the 4th of July. There was an average rate of £86, and the RevPAR, so basically the revenue available per average room for every room, is about £74. That's a really good positive. However, occupancy for the month up until yesterday is only 52%. And when you compare that to last year, most properties would be enjoying at least an 85% occupancy plus. So whilst we're all hoping that August is going to be on average comparable to last year, there are hotels, including one of my hotels, that is definitely not opening for the rest of the year. So it is very tough out there. We are going through very difficult conversations with our teams already, despite even going through August. And we need to be proactive in ways that we can market the town and to keep some of these hotels open during the period. BH Live, sorry. So the Coastal Bid has been very happy to support the BH Live in respect of marketing budgets every year. To give you an idea, we gave them on average £30,000 a year to support their marketing, which in turn has driven millions of pounds into the town by enabling them to pay for exhibitions and expose the town in a very positive way around the UK. We're not actually in that position currently where we will be able to give them that money this year, because a lot of our decisions, certainly around CSAS in Boscombe as well, and also Christmas, which was touched on earlier, is driven by the levy that we anticipate coming in. So on average, we anticipate a levy of around £500,000. As one of my colleagues already alluded to, if we get more than 30%, we will be very, very happy. We can continue the bid currently, and we are applying for grants and being very successful in that, and hope to continue that as a DMO as well. But I just want to put it out there that if we don't get sufficient bids, the bid levy, we could potentially be not providing any services and just being a support service through our various channels to our levy payers, or worst scenario, we could actually be folding in January if no levy is returned. But we very much hope we will not be in that position. Levy I've touched on, so we haven't actually sent our levy letters out. We anticipate sending them out next week. We've been very clear of our levy payers that we do not anticipate them to pay anything within a 3-month period, and it's a very open-ended question to them to let us know what they'd like to do. Are they able to pay, or are they able not to pay? Just to touch on I know there was a conversation about the negative PR around Bournemouth. The positives, in my opinion, is that people can't go away. As I've already demonstrated, we are getting lots and lots of people that are coming to Bournemouth because it's the best beach in the UK and it's clearly advertised as such. But I can tell you factually, we have lost thousands at the Carlton, where people have been very scared to come to Bournemouth because of what they saw on the beach that day. Now, no one's at fault for that. The council did an amazing job and we all supported that, but just factually, hotels did lose business because people were concerned as to what they saw on that day, and that's a non-political, factual statement that I'd just like to comment on. So that's kind of it at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've got one final speaker in this section, who is Lucy Filer from the Christchurch Bid Steering Group. We don't yet have a Business Improvement District in Christchurch, although I think it's been worked on. So I'll pass over to Lucy for the Christchurch perspective. Thank you for joining us, Lucy.
Thank you very much. Yes, as you said, we're in the process of setting up the bid in Christchurch. So I'm speaking on behalf of the steering group. I think Christchurch has had the same challenges as the rest of the conurbation. I echo what's just been said about BCP and the help that's been given.
Right, Kerry, what rooms?
The local businesses are the grants, the way the grants have been handed out, the signage, the site visits, the communications have all been excellent and certainly been a real help to the local businesses. Locally, the businesses are resilient, but they're very nervous. Clearly, now's the time to make hay while the sun shines, and there's just not the footfall for them to do it. I think the next 6 months, 3 months maybe even, are going to be the key. And I echo what was said previously, that it's very difficult to even predict from a steering group point of view as a bid who's going to be our traders, because we don't know who's going to be here in 3 months. We very much hope the current traders will be, but I think the next 3 months, when this is the time they make their money, and this will be really key. They certainly need immediate help and assistance as much as we can give, because this is going to keep them alive. It's life or death rather than survival, rather than a nice to have. Christchurch has got an older population. They've got their own issues. They're more nervous possibly to come out and about, and yet they're not very flexible, so they need to get out and about. They need to visit banks, and the queues down the high street, where one bank's queue crashes into the next bank's queue is difficult, is a challenge. Food and beverage, quite central to the town centre, and they've obviously been. They're finding their feet since reopening, and I think they are not as. I think they've been pleasantly surprised at the amount of custom they have had. But clearly, if it's not going to happen now, it's not going to. They've got to make up now for what's going to be. I think pavement licences would be a huge help. And I echo what Paul just said, that more information to give out to traders and helping them to get this set up would be much use. Obviously, clearly it's not going to be any good when the rain starts, so now's the time to do that. I think our challenge really that we're facing is that we haven't got a bid, we haven't got anyone doing this all the time. We're all volunteers and we're all trying to run our own businesses too, and we haven't got the professional side of having a bid. So we're getting the message out to the traders and really giving them support is a challenge. We're we're starting to work quite closely with the other bids who've offered help greatly. But again, what we're challenging is we've got the same issues, but we've got limited time and very limited resources to be able to do anything for them. So that's our big challenge. As far as Christchurch goes, vision. I think I said this. We don't know what's going to be in 3 months. I don't think we started out our bid process. We had a vision, and we've kind of had to rewrite that vision the same as any other town centre. In that, who knows? Just who knows? It's really a survival vision at the moment. But I walked up the high street at lunchtime. It was busy. There were people out and about, and the feeling was good. So I think it's a nervous optimism that we're feeling in Christchurch.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Lucy, and thank you to the others, Steve, Martin, Paul, and Lucy as well for your contributions. Board members, we'll go on to the tourism side of things in a moment, but while we've got the respective bid representatives, we've heard a few ideas in there, a few positive suggestions, particularly to do with how very immediate concerns on how to help some of our local businesses. Are there any questions from members of the boards that they wish to direct at any of the respective business improvement districts, or are we happy to take all that in the round? I think there's probably some further work to do here in terms of trying to keep working together, but B, to keep this dialogue open. We found it very useful in the past to have that slight call and response, because as we progress immediately, even on a weekly basis, we're finding new things that are changing and new ideas that may be coming through the system that we may wish to bring forward. So I have Councillor Trent wishing to come in. Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. There was quite a lot of interesting things said about actually making the town centre and the shopping centres more attractive, and I wholeheartedly concur with that. But during the lockdown and even before the lockdown and since the lockdown, I'm forever in various forums giving people reasons why they should go to a retailer to buy something or to window shop or whatever, rather than actually buying online. And I think one of the biggest issues that has occurred over the last few months is that people who weren't buying online have actually got into the habit of buying online. And I'm wondering whether, in addition to all of the various other we're open, welcome back, we're a nice place to visit, whether there's actually scope to have some sort of campaign or promotion about the benefits of buying in person at a retailer, the idea of getting proper service and advice and so on, and whether on the back of that we also perhaps should consider a mass lobby of government, because they are trying to do things that get the economy moving again, and they've done something quite beneficial to the hospitality industry. But I wonder whether perhaps one of the things that could be asked for is that they actually have a lower rate of VAT for purchases at a physical retailer than they have on online purchases, and whether there's any scope to perhaps lobby the Chancellor on that, and whether that would be a way forward. And the other point I wanted to highlight, I was very interested in the idea of looking at a reduced parking rate after 3 p.m. It might be 4 p.m. or whatever. I wonder whether that could be explored and looked at to see whether it's something that could sort of fit in with a look at the parking fees, to encourage people over a wider part of the day to do their shopping, because you do tend to get sort of periods where shopping's busy and then it goes quiet. But as I say, the most important thing is actually what we can do practically that gets people thinking immediately of buying in a shop and looking at a shop rather than buying online, whether there's something that we could perhaps be moving on there.
Sure, thank you, Councillor Trent. I've got Martin from the Town Centre bid indicating that he wishes to come in, although I can tell you from experience you do not need a crystal ball to ask the question about whether council should be reducing parking and guessing what the answer might be from our businesses. But I'll pass to Martin, who may well prove me wrong. Who knows? Martin.
I've tilted at that windmill before. I'm going to leave it alone this afternoon. But I would agree with Councillor Trent. I think the internet shopping genie's not going back in the bottle. We've all got used to it. So yes, I think we do need to. It's something that has to be done by national government, either by differential VAT rates or by an online sales tax or something. But well, if we're lobbying central government on that, if I could just chuck in a pitch for another one. It'd be nice if we could keep all our business rates, not just some of them, and apply the entirety of the business rates that are collected locally to supporting the local community. But I think they are issues that require national solutions. There's a limit to how much we can do locally. And that's all I've really got to say on the subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. I've got Paul and Steve, and then we're going to move on, I'm afraid, to the tourism. We're running out of time. But Paul.
Very quickly, Councillor Broadhead, a couple of things from Councillor Trent. I actually think this idea of a campaign to say about local service is a good one. Because I think that could work on two levels. One, it could be promoting reasons why people should come into shops and get that personal service. But two, it actually allows the bids to work with shops within their respective areas on even improving customer service, because one of the things that's going to draw people back into town centres more now than it ever did is the whole experience of coming into a town centre. Back onto the safety and security bit, but also there's opportunities, I think, for us to support our retailers in improving what is already very good customer service even more. So I think that's actually one I will pick up and explore. I think that's a very good call. And then just very quickly, obviously we in the town centre, Councillor Trent, we have a gift card that you cannot use online. So it actually encourages people to buy a gift card for their friends and family. And we're working with the university to promote it to parents so that when the students come back, they can have them as well. But they can only be spent on shops within the town centre bid area. They're not online. So the more anybody can help get behind that and promote that, I think would be very good for shops as well.
Thank you very much, Paul. And finally, I'll bring Steve in from Pool Bid. Steve.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's an instant win, but obviously the bids are seeing lots and lots of apps to deal with this, that and the other. And it was interesting we talk about transport, and I'm not sure whether how it fits in, but quite clearly we're talking about discounting parking at certain times. But equally, there may be mileage and exploring with the bus companies, some sort of loyalty scheme, whereas if you spend in shops and you can't arrive by bus or whatever, there'll be some loyalty, so you gain some points that you could potentially cash in at some time in the future. I think the supermarkets, some of them do a pretty good job of refunding parking fees, and it's a very low scale scheme compared to that. Just the thoughts.
No, thank you very much. Well, thank you all for the bids for joining us. By all means, do stick around. We haven't got much longer left in this meeting, but now we'll pivot towards the tourism side of our economy. And first, I will go to a representative from Baja, which is the BH hospitality sector representative, Tim Stewart, who's the chairman. Thank you for joining us, Tim.
Thank you very much, Councillor Broadhead. Hotels have remained very positive during the COVID-19 period, and as an association, we're starting to work with many other associations across the Central South, including Southampton and Weymouth, and it's good to hear about them and work together on best practices. During the lockdown, some hotels continued with refurbishment, from the Queen's Hotel, as you've all seen in the press, over to the Cliff House, which has done their garden, which has been amazing for both businesses. We have seen 3 hotels sadly close in the area during the lockdown, which is a lot less than other coastal resorts. 2 being the Bay hotels, which is the Savoy on the West Cliff and the Majestic on the East Cliff. And recently, last week, you would have seen in the news the Grove Macmillan Hotel, which is very sad. A few hotels have remained open for key workers during the period, and we are very grateful for those hotels that have stayed open. A number of hotels reopened across the conurbation on the 4th of July with lower occupancy than expected. With the major incident being called and going viral, many hotels received a large number of phone calls and cancellations, resulting in thousands of pounds of losses, with guests not coming to just restay in Bournemouth. This has had a major impact on a large number of businesses for future bookings. And with earlier on, various people saying that the major incident is on standby, that is now worrying for us as a hotel association, as we don't really want to have further cancellations. With current situation, pickup is good. And this weekend, as Paul Clark, my colleague who was on the bid, has just said, we had good occupancy across the town with the hotels that are open. Sadly, though, not all hotels have reopened, and there are a number still closed. And this winter especially is a major concern, with especially those hotels with function space and what is going to happen with the likes of Christmas parties. Some hotels so far have made redundancies, and there are already others in consultation. Some are even already considering closing for the winter months, which will make a bigger impact on redundancies. I think it would be very beneficial to all hotels at the present time for the council to consider both short and long-term calendar of events and confirmation of bigger events that will bring a significant impact on financial income to the town, i.e. air show, with commitment not just for next year but for 3 years in the future, and have that long-term commitment. As hotels, we also need a commitment for Christmas. What is the offering? Not in September, October, but now, so we can tell those guests that are coming for the summer months what we are going to be offering and what that will look like. Hotels now more than ever need a stronger tourism team, and this would not be the time to remove Chris or John, but use their expertise from the past. John Weaver, during the lockdown period, has been a substantial support to the hospitality industry and keeping us up to date. We do also ask the council, we would ask if we could please look at asking the council if we can now lose some old bed stock that is not worthy to accommodate leisure guests and other guests. The council has also proposed, as my colleague was saying as well, about different pedestrianised areas. I would ask the council to reconsider the closure of the road from the Carlton Hotel going down to the Royal Bath. This is not welcomed for those hotels, especially the Miramar and the Marsham Court in this area, and will not help in the recovery of these hotels. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Tim, so I'll now move on to the Destination Management Board, which is our main tourism board, and we have 2 guests from there, David Bailey and Craig Matthey. Again, I'm not sure who's intending to go first. I'll leave that to you chaps, but you're both very welcome. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Before we start, I'd just like to say that we must never lose the sight that we live and work in an incredible area, and nobody could have foreseen this pandemic. And I'm sure, although I haven't seen any signs of the V-shaped recovery yet, but I'm sure that people will want to come to this area to stay and work. And we have some incredible businesses out there, very professionally operated, and I was sorry to hear that there have been reports that some of them aren't adhering to social distancing rules and hygiene regulations, and it will be interesting to see how enforcement actually works with those businesses. Just to remind everybody, tourism spend across England is £13.7 billion a year pre-COVID. In our area, £1.2 billion a year, employing in excess of 17,000 people. I think it's estimated that tourism spend in England will be reduced by about 8 billion because of the impact of COVID. I'm not sure how that's going to translate to our area, but it will certainly have a big impact. I wanted to go through all the areas that the Destination Management Board look after, and I will pass over a little while to my colleague, Vice Chair Craig, who will pick up on some of these sectors. Tim and Paul have already spoken very eloquently about hotels, and I would echo also what Paul Kimbig said regarding the local plan. Our council set themselves a big target of producing a new local plan in less than half the time allocated by the government to do this. I'm not sure how the progress of that has been stalled because of the COVID-19 crisis, but the local plan is going to be invaluable moving forward in getting the area where it needs to be. I sit on the SPD panel to do with planning. We look at hotels, hospitality businesses that want change of use. At the moment, the criteria for change of use is economic viability. I really feel that that criteria should be changed to impact on tourism. We need to get rid of some of the maybe not quite so salubrious hotels in our area. These can easily be converted into residential accommodation, and we need to encourage the new hotels with higher quality accommodation. The local plan will also have an impact on Westover Road. I think that Westover Road is very, very important. It's the link between the east of our town and the town centre. The centre of Bournemouth has moved westward in the last few years, and I think we run the risk of the East Cliff becoming somewhat marginalised for both visitors and residents. They used Westover Road to access the town centre, and at the moment they're not keen on doing it. It's not a nice experience to go down Westover Road. So I think work on the local plan is imperative to get us where we want to be. So I won't speak about hotels because I think Tim and Paul have done that very well already. If we move on to the transport sector, our local bus companies were very hard hit during this crisis, and I think a lot of their problems have come out of the mixed messaging from central government. You know, we want to get people back to work, we want people to get on the buses, but actually we don't want them to get back on the buses. I think both companies locally have done a cracking job, and they've had support from the council, so that's very, very good. We've already spoken about the experimental traffic regulation orders. These are going to cause a few problems for both bus companies, probably more for sightseeing. We have a very strong destination management board which feeds into all sectors of hospitality and tourism, and I just wish that the council, I know these orders have a 7-day lead-in time, and that is the idea, to get things done quickly. But I do feel that if the council had engaged with the businesses via the Destination Management Board or some of the other trade organisations, a lot of the issues that have come out of these orders could have been resolved. I know that BCP Tourism and Pool Bid have had a lot of conversations with businesses on Pool Quay to try and placate some of them. They were very unhappy about these orders. I think the key there is probably animation, get some life onto the quay to bring people in. But just in future, I do think we need to consult, even if it's on a very fast basis, as these orders would be, less than 7 days. The other big area of concern for transport is the coach industry. This was identified very early on in this crisis as being probably one of the last sectors to recover. We've already seen 2 hotels in Bournemouth that have closed because they were owned by a major coaching company. But there are many, many hotels across our area, privately owned, who rely on the coach business to keep them going. And this is going to be quite a big problem. Moving on to attractions, most of our attractions are opening up, but slowly. The issues with social distancing and reduced numbers are going to impact on their profitability. And of course, many of the attractions were impacted by the ETROs, which was not a helpful thing for them. International education is going to probably be one of the last sectors to recover from this crisis. We're not expecting visitors to come back until next year, although interestingly there is considerable interest now from Asia and China in particularly to come back for education in this country. But saying that, Guido Schillig, who sits on the IEF, we were on a call with the Home Secretary last week. We were asking about visas and people travelling on identity cards rather than passports. But Guido has said that across the international education sector, 30% of businesses are not likely to come through this crisis. So that's 30% of our language schools likely to close, and that's that will have quite a big impact on the towns. If I could now hand over to Craig Matthew, my Vice Chair, who will speak on eating out, events and conferencing.
Thank you very much, David. Before I pass over to Craig, it appears from social media and things that there is quite a large cliff fire in Bournemouth. So if any of the officers or politicians involved with it do need to go from the call, I completely understand, because it does seem to be quite an incident. So bear with me a second. Apologies, four-year-old interruption, but sorry, not a interruption by a 4-year-old. So I'll move on to Craig now. Thank you very much, Craig.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks for inviting me along to this meeting. As David mentioned, I'm here as the Vice Chair of the Destination Management Board, but by day I'm the Managing Director of Bournemouth Sevens Festival. As David alluded to, I'll be just kind of covering off 3 different areas relatively quickly, as I'm conscious that we've been sat here for a little while listening. So I guess the first of those areas is eating out, and the story there is relatively similar to the accommodation sector, really. I think it's good to say at this point that the pandemic has seen the creation of some additional representation for eating out through the Wonky Table Group, which is a group which was formed locally and consists of in excess of 200 venues across BCP who are looking for that additional representation. One of the good things about that is there's a variety of sizes of business in there, all having a voice that they previously hadn't had. So, and we've engaged with them through DMB in a way that we probably hadn't previously. Feedback to them is that there's been a slow start probably to businesses reopening and to customers returning. The majority of the reason to that seems to be some customers understandably hesitant to venture out and about, and some of that cases is obviously related to age of different kind of portions of the conurbation. I think there's common feeling that a lot of the central government and local support in terms of that furlough and so forth has been well received, and just also to commend the council on and the officers of the council in their distribution of those funds to business. I think it commonly felt that was done very quickly, efficiently, and very well. And also a mention of the Eat Out to Help Out campaign, which Tim mentioned earlier. I think Spreading the Week is a real key campaign that we want to get behind, and the council to get behind, to try and drive those numbers through the week, spread the trade where it may otherwise have just been at weekends, just to generate additional income for the sector. But I think really good to have representation for that portion of the industry and of the local business community through an avenue alongside the bids. Speaking then on conferences and exhibitions, and the feedback was provided by the convention and conferences group prior to the announcement on Friday, obviously, of a go date for the start of October. No venues, however, are currently open. And there's kind of some significant concern within that sector about the cost implications of COVID compliance, and also about customer confidence in returning to venues, and also whether the new way of working and how that has kind of developed, and meetings such as this, which can now be hosted online, whether that will mean that actually there may be a decline in conferences with physical attendees overall. So I think with the movement of the 1st of October go date, that's potentially move things forward a bit, but also obviously a cause for concern. And then I guess kind of talking finally about outdoor events, as David mentioned, this is an area that I kind of have a bit more information on. I do sit on the National Outdoor Events Association, which has had a seat at the DCMS task force on outdoor events and the guidance which was issued last week. So I think in order for events to succeed outdoors, effectively you need a summer and you need the ability to have crowds, and we unfortunately have been deprived of both. And there seems to be a general acceptance amongst events organisers, both locally and nationally, that until the JBC reduces the alert level to level 2, outdoor events are unlikely to come back in any meaningful fashion. The event sector itself is somewhat uniquely exposed, as we don't make money on day one, unlike some of our colleagues in hospitality, and there's often up to a year's lead-in time to an event taking place, at which point the revenues will be reached. And David mentioned also just generally about the value of tourism in the UK economy, but also to focus more specifically on outdoor events. And they contributed £30 billion to the UK economy, according to a recent study by Bournemouth University, £2.1 billion of which was spent in the southwest. So I think it's really important to be mindful of events, and I think nationally and regionally, people working in the event sector have suffered. In that not a huge amount of politicians or policymakers are aware of the value of the event sector, potentially financially and culturally. And just talking about that on the R-Cubed kind of programme, which has been alluded to, I think there's an opportunity here to reimagine the value of events, and we have some fantastic local events, things such as Air Festival and privately held events as well. So there's definitely some huge opportunity in this, I think, to position BCP in general as a focal point of both indoor and outdoor events across all sectors in arts, culture, sport, music, and also family-friendly things. And the only other thing just to mention briefly in relation to the conversation earlier relating to the major incident, I do feel that the events sector has some expertise in crowd dynamics and crowd movements, which could potentially feed into those wider discussions. We are used to dealing with people descending from different areas and so forth, and there's some people locally who may be able to offer some advice or some guidance and support in that campaign just moving forward. And finally, I think just to say that we across events and across all areas of tourism are looking forward to the positivity and trying to retain the focus on the opportunities that are presented to the local area to reimagine, and BCP has an amazing reputation, and it's one that we feel can be enhanced through consultation and collaborative working. But I'll hand over to David again, just in case he has anything else to add, but that's it from me.
Thank you, Craig. David, anything that's been missed out?
Yeah, all I would like to finish up with is to say that what we do in this area best is to work collaboratively. The BIDS, BAHA, the Destination Management Board, the LEP, all work very closely with BCP Council. And I think that's something that really needs to be flagged up as probably the main thing that's going to get us through this crisis. We all need to work together. I would certainly like to thank the leader of the council and chief executive, who, since I became chair of the Destination Management Board, have supported the board which I think is invaluable. The council need feedback from the trade, and the trade need to know what the council are planning. So collaboration is the key there. I'm sure everyone that knows me wouldn't expect me to come to a forum like this and not mention the Air Festival, something very dear to my heart. I would seriously ask the council to give thought to giving us a 3-year mandate to continue with the Air Festival. This will make planning of the Air Festival much easier. The vast majority of hospitality and tourism businesses are behind the Air Festival. It brings an awful lot of money into the area, creates jobs, and it would be a great pity to lose this. So in summing up, when I say tourism, I mean the tourism function within BCP Council. Tourism was analysing the effects of this crisis very, very early on, to look at what effect it was going to have on the industry and to start a roadmap to recovery. And I think it is incredibly important to have a strong tourism voice, vital for our local economy, all our local businesses, and particularly important in the potential bounce back that we're about to experience. So let's leave tourism. It works efficiently, it's run professionally, and it's respected across all sectors across this area. So I think it's invaluable for our area to continue with tourism as it is.
Thank you very much to both David and Craig. Another really interesting set of updates, but some practical suggestions in there as well. I've got a few questions from board members. I'll go first of all to Councillor Haynes. Councillor Haynes.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and I thank the presenters for being so open with their presentation. I found that very interesting. I want to come back to the first speaker on tourism, which is Tim Stewart, and I was particularly concerned to hear him say that as a result of partly declaring the major incident and also because of the media coverage of the beaches in Bournemouth and in the conurbation, that people decided they didn't want to come, and that also there are cancellations. And it is concerning to hear that, because obviously it's all linked up. You have people that come, visitors come, they stay in the hotel, but then they will also then hopefully go to our town centres and then go to our restaurants. So it's all kind of part of a circle. I'm just wondering whether, as a board, we might want to give some thought as to what positive messaging as a council we can put out there to say, actually, it is safe to come down, it is safe to come and visit Bournemouth, Poole, Christchurch as a destination, because I think that our local tourism industry do need help to really get back onto a level, because it has been such a difficult 3 to 4 months. Thank you,
Councillor Haynes. I've got Tim wishing to come back on that. Well, whilst you're coming back, Tim, I just wonder if you may wish to also address the point. Actually, I think it was brought up by the Chief Exec earlier on. It was about that very subject of positivity and the messaging that we're sending out to people. That not only can we cope and it's fine to come, but also that it's safe to. And I think that might even draw in with the conversations that I know the council is having with Public Health England, to try and make sure that we've got those statistics to really very clearly state that actually, yes, there are a lot of people here. No, we're doing everything properly, and so yes, we're doing everything properly, and no, that hasn't linked to a peak, because again, that all draws into that conversation about Bournemouth and Christchurch and Poole being open for business, doesn't it? But Tim, I'll pass back to you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Broadhead. Just to let you know, everybody, you've been calling me Tim Stewart all afternoon. It's lovely to be called a new name. I'm Tim Seaward, but yeah, it's lovely to be called Tim Stewart. Thank you very much.
I think I started that, so I do apologise, Tim. You won't let me forget it, I'm sure.
Obviously, when the announcement had been made on the Tuesday of the week, we had the lovely weather, that hotels would reopen. The pickup on the Tuesday across the hotel industry was positive on the Tuesday. The Wednesday, Thursday, obviously we had the hot weather. The Thursday, the major incident was called, I do know it's a large number of hotels with a large number of cancellations, and these cancellations weren't from the first week of opening. These cancellations are across the summer season. In saying that, obviously we have had a bumper weekend, as my colleague Paul Clark and other people have said. And the hotels, I think when the Mr. Sunshine comes out, it is great for everybody. But those regular older guests that come to Bournemouth in the winter shoulder months, who don't normally come in the summer season. It has frightened some tourists off of coming back to us, and it has raised a number of cancellations and issues across the conurbation. We're not just talking Bournemouth here, we're talking Christchurch and Poole as well.
Thank you, Tim. Councillor Mike Green. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chairman. I was also going to go back to Tim, if I may, just to ask a little bit more about the potential closure of, I don't know whether it's Jervis Road or East Overcliff Drive or Grove Road that he's talking about when he mentioned that, because whichever it is, as a ward councillor, I don't think it's anything that I've been informed about.
Yeah, no, this was given, this was details that were given to the Miramar Hotel and Marsham Court Hotel, and there was a discussion on pedestrianising from the Carlton Hotel right the way down as a temp measure, right the way down to the Royal Bath Hotel. That is the information I'm aware. Those hoteliers have the information. I just see now that Councillor Slade has said no, there's no plans for that at all, which is great. If those hotels could be contacted, but there was some communication pushed out about that in email format to those hotels. But I see now that Councillor Slade has said that is now stopped, which is fantastic news for those hotels. Thank you.
If I may, Chairman, thank you very much. Thank you to Councillor Slade for letting us know on that one. Maybe offline, if we could try and find out why, as ward councillors, we didn't have any idea about anything that must have been looked at, or maybe it had nothing to do with the council, but it sort of sounds as though it probably did.
Thank you very much, Councillor Green. Are there any further questions from colleagues? I'm not seeing any others. Colleagues, I'm sensing that there's an awful lot in here, and it's quite hard to immediately come up with a few easy wins from this, or even easy recommendations to make. I wonder whether this type of thing, the economic and tourism recovery, is something that as a board we may want to look at having a working group on to continue to the conversations with the colleagues here, with the portfolio holders, to come up with some new ideas, going forward, because I've heard a number of very good practical suggestions from both colleagues in the bid and also from the destination board and Baha about things that they would like to see on the ground immediately, and I'm conscious that we don't want to lose them, frankly. So we've done a few other similar groups, and where we can just, those that are interested, get together and just dig a little deeper. And I think it would be, I'm just very conscious that there's a lot in there which could come from this board as some practical recommendations, helpful recommendations, but there's almost so much in there at the moment that it's hard to distill, so it might just need a little bit further time. I wonder whether any colleagues had any views on that, or whether I'm barking up completely the wrong tree. My aim, as with other working groups, would be very much council led. So we would drive it, and we could get together and perhaps feed directly some of these points. Councillor Bartlett.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good idea. I'd be happy to volunteer to sit on the working group.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any dissent from that on the chat, so I'm quite happy to propose that. And if I could seek a seconder, Councillor Brooke. Councillor Brooke, are you there?
Yeah, I am there. Thank you, Chair. I did send a message to you saying that I was happy to support a working group if officers' workloads permit in terms of their support. It seems to have missed you. It said the action couldn't be completed. Please try again. So
no, it has come through, and that's why I responded to say I think like the previous two working groups that we set up, I think it can and should be driven by us as politicians. That's what we're here to do.
Yeah, I'll be happy with that, and like Councillor Bartlett, I'll be willing to sit on that working group.
Okay, fantastic. So I'll propose that. Are you happy to second it, Councillor Brooke?
Yeah, I'll gladly do that.
Excellent. And do I have any colleagues that are against that proposal? In which case, I'm not seeing any, in which case what we can do is offline, we can take that on board and perhaps maybe even report to the next, not the next meeting, which is in an hour and a half's time, but the next but one meeting with some kind of initial thoughts and hopefully practical proposals. Colleagues, unless there are any further questions or comments on this particular item, we're pretty much bang on time. We do need a bit of a break before the next meeting. Once again, I would very, very much like to thank all of those external people that joined us for the call: Steve Riley from Pool Bid, Martin Davis and Paul Kinvig from the Bournemouth Town Centre Bid, Paul Clark from the Coastal Bid, Tim Seward from Baha, David and Craig from the Destination Management Board, and also Lucy Filer from the Christchurch Bid Steering Group. If it's all right with all of you, we'll be in touch, and we'll certainly be looking through a number of those suggestions that you've raised today to try and crystallise them into some real actions. If we do not have any further points to raise on the issue, that is the completion of item 10. We don't have any further items on this meeting, and therefore I will see all of the board members again for our second of our two meetings dealing with the cabinet related items, the scrutiny of those at 6 p.m, and I will close the meeting. Thank you very much to all those board members that joined us, to members of staff, portfolio holders, external guests, press and the public. Have a very good afternoon.